Chapter 1. The sun god ascended from the eastern horizon in his chariot, granting life to all beings through its radiant presence. Even the tiniest ant basked in the benevolent glow. Sunlight cascaded upon the earth, infusing all things with vibrant vitality. Wisps of smoke from cooking fires danced gently in the air, gradually dispersed by a soft breeze. The wild rose territory, nestled in the southwestern fringes of the Kingdom of Flowers, was governed by a baron officially recognized by the crown. Apart from the baron's castle in Rose Town, 6 additional villages thrived within its borders, housing approximately 800 households and around 3,000 souls. It was named the Wild Rose Territory to distinguish it from the true Rose Territory, a marquisate boasting a substantial population of 10,000 subjects. The land of the Wild Rose Territory, though less fertile than the rich plains of the kingdom's heartland, still sustained its inhabitants. Through their industrious hands and a meandering tributary that flowed through their domain, they had firmly established their livelihoods in this precarious land. Except for the taxes due in summer and autumn, the diligent villagers managed to stockpile provisions for the harsh winter, avoiding the grim fate of becoming indentured servants. Thanks to the merciful Lord George, this year's autumn tax remains at 4/10. From dawn until noon, the 6 villages under the Wild Rose Territory buzzed with excitement as news spread of the baron's emissary, who had posted proclamations. Those literate in the kingdom's common script breathed a sigh of relief upon reading the announcement. Word quickly spread that the autumn tax would remain unchanged from the previous year, unlike the neighboring Thistle Territory, which had imposed a higher rate of 5/10. Without comparison, there is no pain, even though everyone knew that the kingdom's tax was actually 3/10. Yet under the eaves, one must bow their head. Once they chose to become subjects of the Lord, it was but a matter of a word to be molded and reshaped. What other choice did they have? Would they confront knights clad in armor, brandishing spears, armed only with hoes and pitchforks? It was said that in a certain northern territory, a similar defiance had led to hundreds being punished as slaves, with dozens meeting their end on the gallows. Though the children were unaware of the unfolding events, they sensed a lighter atmosphere than usual, calling to one another as they scampered away. The adults who witnessed this scene could only chuckle and scold them lightly. After all, children always represented the future. We've gone so far, perhaps we should head back. In the southernmost village of Ginkgo, 3 children, all under the age of 10, chased and played, drifting further away. As the last boy turned to glance back at the village, now a mere speck on the horizon, a sense of unease welled up within him. Turning again to survey his surroundings, he noticed the untamed wilderness, overgrown with wild grasses, extending toward a dense forest that resembled a thick line in the distance. The villagers of Ginkgo referred to this sprawling forest to the south as the Great River Jungle, for a small stream that flowed through their village was but a tributary of the Great River, whose true source lay deep within the forest, leading to uncharted territories. For the 99% of ordinary peasants who had never ventured beyond their territory, the world outside their modest plots was fraught with peril. I heard from Shurtu that, deeper in the forest, mushrooms can be found by the edge of the woods. It rained a few days ago, so we should definitely be able to gather some mushrooms now and have mushroom soup later. The foremost boy enticed his companions to press on. Before the second boy could respond, the first boy urged them to continue. The other 2 exchanged glances, their hearts stirred with excitement. If they could bring back a few mushrooms, perhaps they would avoid a scolding upon their return. But there are little green-skinned goblins in the forest. What's their name again? Yin Ni Dun. It's goblins, you fool. What's there to be afraid of? We won't venture deep into the jungle. We won't encounter any goblins outside. Once they grow up, they're not even as tall as the 3 of us. If we do run into them, we can just throw stones to scare them away. After advancing a little further, a disagreement arose once more. Yet the allure of the delicious mushroom soup proved too enticing to resist. The 3 boys each picked up a few stones and continued onward. As the sun began to set, the weary adults returned to the village after a long day. In Ginkgo, with its mere 100 residents, there were truly few secrets to keep. Thus, the news of the 3 children who had left the village at noon and had yet to return spread rapidly throughout the community. What shall we do? Nightfall is nearly upon us. The 3 women, who usually showed no mercy in disciplining their own children, now stood at the village's entrance, their eyes red-rimmed with worry as they scanned the distance, anxiously awaiting their return. Once night descended, even adults venturing beyond the sturdy wooden fences of the village could face danger, as there were precedents of knights being slain by monsters during their nocturnal travels. Night did not belong to humanity. A group of older children was gathered to inquire about the whereabouts of the missing trio. Without surprise, it was quickly discovered that they had ventured southward, the most perilous direction. It was known that traveling 2 or 3 miles south from the village brought one to the very edge of the great river jungle. Heading north, however, was considerably safer, for Rose Town, the seat of the Lord's castle, lay to the north. Approximately 10 minutes later, as the sun god's chariot had yet to fully dip below the horizon, a search party hastily organized by the villagers of Ginkgo set forth from the southern gate, inching closer to the great river jungle, a place they typically avoided. It is often said that those who dwell near mountains rely on the mountains, and those near water rely on the water, but the great river jungle was different. In fact, the kingdom of flowers, and indeed this world, was unlike any other. The reason lay with the monsters. Beyond the realm of human activity, over half of this world remains unexplored, perilous territory. Such places serve as a paradise for monsters. Other races, possessing intelligence but not classified as human, are often labeled as monsters by humanity, except for high-intelligence races like dwarves and elves, with whom humans have established diplomatic relations. Within the forests dwell minotaurs, goblins, and fae. Among the mountains are gremlins, stone giants, and serpent folk. In the frigid regions, there are half-wild, half-civilized tribes, snow wraiths, and ice elves, among others. Even the rivers and lakes are home to various types of fish folk. As for the oceans, it is unnecessary to elaborate. No one truly knows how many races possess language and martial prowess beyond humanity. Just as insects are classified by humans as pests or beneficial creatures, the term monster is merely a label imposed by humanity. Occasionally, one might glimpse monsters mingling among human settlements, most appearing as slaves, while a few manage to infiltrate human society through fortuitous encounters, leading lives similar to humans, accepted by a select few. The goblins, gremlins, and fish folk, notorious for their mischief, are often regarded as the 3 worst types of monsters, viewed by many as more loathsome than rats. Though rats proliferate, their small size prevents them from confronting humans directly. They merely steal a morsel of food. Goblins, however, are different. They can reproduce prolifically and are only slightly smaller than humans. In a direct confrontation, an ordinary adult man stands a significant chance of perishing when ambushed by 3 to 5 goblins. Even in riverine areas, facing a fish folk unknown can be perilous. Fish folk are purely carnivorous, but fortunately, they cannot remain away from water for long. They typically only venture a short distance on land, posing the least threat of the 3. Gremlins are known for their burrowing habits. They have even been known to tunnel through entire mountains, and an expedition against them may uncover rich veins of or within their lairs. And what of goblins? To humanity, they rank as the foremost of the 3 evils. The Kingdom of Flowers has long offered bounties for goblin corpses, which can be exchanged for copper or even silver coins. Many mercenaries rely on goblin hunting for their bread and ale. Goblins, like humans, are omnivorous, with a far broader diet that includes insects, fruits, meats, grains, mushrooms, and more. They consume everything except their own kind. Goblins do not engage in production, yet they have existed in this world since humanity's early days, thriving in the wake of human civilization's rise. The reason is simple. They have humanity as a diligent neighbor. Raiding has become so ingrained in goblin nature that it is almost instinctive, passed down through generations, evident even in the behavior of goblin children. It is considered entirely normal for the strong to seize food and tools from their peers, and no one intervenes to uphold justice. Within goblin society, a clear hierarchy exists. Goblins born of common stock are destined to remain the property of their leaders, while the progeny of goblin chiefs are, of course, considered nobility. Occasionally, a particularly strong ordinary goblin may alter this status quo, but more often than not, The average goblin toils solely to fill their own belly and that of their lord. On the surface, Meng Qing appeared as calm as an old dog. Yet within, he was a bundle of nerves. Anyone who awakens from the bustling metropolis to the depths of a forest where sunlight scarcely bestows its grace would undoubtedly be bewildered. Even more alarming is the realization that he may bear an uncanny resemblance to the non-human entities surrounding him. Limbs as slender as mere twigs. Skin the verdant hue of foliage. A disproportionately large head, prominent ears, and a mouth filled with sharp teeth, distinctly different from those of humanity. It took Meng Qing an entire morning to come to terms with the fact that he had been transformed into a diminutive goblin. This is a goblin, after all, so feeble that in any timeline or documentation, it is always the hapless target for fledgling warriors to hone their skills upon. Their combat prowess, if one were to exaggerate, might barely reach 5, but in reality, it is no more than 2.5. The perks of transmigration are few. Fluency in language is one, allowing Meng Qing to comprehend the chatter of the other green-skinned goblins, though such a designation is, in itself, a self-deprecating remark. The second boon is particularly significant. Meng Qing is not an ordinary goblin, but rather the offspring of the chief of a diminutive goblin tribe, numbering less than 100. His father is absent from the tribe, and the current chief is his nominal uncle, the brother of the former leader. The uncle has 5 children, yet Meng Qing, in his new form, is remarkably a rare only child, an occurrence more uncommon than quintuplets among goblins. The third advantage is that Meng Qing has acquired information without relying on others. The certainty of his current form as a goblin, rather than a gremlin or a forest sprite, is confirmed by the third boon. This boon manifests as a characteristic template often found in transmigration novels, or more specifically, a secondary panel known as the detection skill. Name: Morning Star named Club Morning Star Meng Qing. Title: None. Race: Goblin Mixed Blood. Bloodline: 49 Goblin, 25 Human, 25 Elf, 1 Unknown. The first day of mixed blood goblin Meng Qing's sojourn in this foreign realm swiftly passed. During this time, he boldly ventured from his solitary and rudimentary wooden dwelling to explore the camp, where the ordinary goblins exhibited great deference towards him, even bordering on fervor. This curiosity was elucidated in the afternoon, when his uncle's children visited his wooden abode. Through casual conversation with his somewhat dim-witted cousin, Meng Qing unearthed the truth. It was a matter of bloodline suppression and reverence. The goblin bloodline is undeniably inferior, far surpassed by that of humans. Goblin hybrids possessing human blood typically grow to a height of 3.5 to 4 feet upon reaching adulthood, while purebred goblins cease growing at 3 feet. Within the Great Club Camp, the number of goblins with more than 10% human blood does not exceed 10, including his uncle and his children. Meng Qing discerned this clearly through his detection skill and grasped some underlying truths. Goblins do not engage in agriculture. Their primary source of meat consists of insects, supplemented by birds and beasts even weaker than goblins. It is rare to find bird nests within the several hundred meters where goblins roam, lest they be raided before the eggs can hatch. In addition to the meat provided by birds and beasts, goblins readily consume sweet fruits, plant roots, berries, and starchy seeds, embracing all that the forest offers, with a particular fondness for mushrooms that thrive in the shade of decaying tree trunks. As their strength develops, to a certain extent, goblins dare to raid any group, including their kin, to sustain their community, which naturally includes humans. In typical circumstances, after enduring losses among the elderly, young, sick, and disabled, one could plunder sufficient provisions and various tools to sustain oneself for a considerable duration. There may be fortuitous instances where one might seize human civilians, with the unfortunate fate of males being immediate execution, while females, though not swiftly dispatched, face a far more tragic destiny. Meng Qing speculates that the grandfather of his goblin body must have been a distinguished figure among goblins. Hence his descendants possess human blood. However, this lineage diminishes with each generation. Without exception, after 3 to 5 generations, over 90% of the bloodline reverts to that of an ordinary goblin. Similarly, Meng Qing deduces the origin of the elven blood coursing through his current form. If the paternal figure was a successful individual, then this body-s father could be likened to a true protagonist, akin to a dragon among men, for aside from him, no other goblin in the Big Stick camp possesses elven blood. Which is remarkably telling. It turns out that the bargain father sought out his escaped half-elven mother, a rather tragic circumstance. One can only hope he does not perish too easily, despite the fact that Meng-Qing has yet to lay eyes on him. As the sun sets, Meng-Qing reflects on the intricacies of his situation with a long sigh. Regardless of his reluctance, the fact remains that he is transformed into a goblin, a reality that will not change easily. Thus, he must devise a plan. Survival in this unfamiliar world is paramount before addressing further matters. Even as a goblin, Meng-Qing retains a sense of pride from his former humanity, endowed with intelligence far surpassing that of goblins and the knowledge acquired during his human existence. As night descends, he concludes, based on his observations throughout the day, that the combined intelligence of all the goblins in the Big Stick tribe amounts to no more than that of 7 or 8 individuals. He need not wait until he becomes an elderly goblin with a long beard to emerge as the sage among goblins. He is already the undisputed goblin sage, albeit unbeknownst to others. Goblin intelligence typically correlates with age, a phenomenon particularly evident among goblins who occasionally interact with humans near human territories. These insights, which Meng-Qing has inadvertently gathered, have gone unnoticed even by the current lord of the Big Stick camp. Radish Big Stick that he is a pure hedonist, his physique towering above ordinary goblins, making him a striking figure in the camp. With nearly half of his lineage stemming from humans, he possesses pure strength and height that overwhelms, rendering even a group of 3 or 4 goblins insufficient and unwilling to confront him. In terms of language, Meng-Qing has now mastered the goblin tongue, as for writing. The characters used in the Big Stick camp resemble pictographs, numbering no more than 20. Even the same character written by 2 goblins can differ. Humans have yet to be encountered, leaving Meng-Qing uncertain whether he could comprehend their speech or master their written language. To live a life akin to ordinary goblins, languishing in the forest, would signify utter failure for Meng-Qing. After finishing a meal composed of food painstakingly gathered by the ordinary goblins, he returned to his wooden hut to prepare a more detailed plan. The Big Stick camp is relatively close to human settlements, and during dinner, Radish Big Stick proudly proclaimed that 3 human souls had met their end beneath his hammer, for 2 races harboring deep-seated enmity. Such an occurrence is not deemed evil, but rather a mark of honor, as evidenced by the envious and reverent gazes of other goblins. The Big Stick camp is nestled at the edge of a jungle through which a great river flows. And the jungle is vast, as every goblin asserts that the trek northward leads one out of the jungle and closer to human villages. However, human villages are guarded by militia archers, stout wooden palisades, and various traps. Sending 3 to 50 goblins against 100 human households would be tantamount to seeking death. The Big Stick camp has not engaged in raids against humans for the past 2 years. Not from a lack of desire, but rather due to inability. Without that bargain father, the camp has been in decline. The human world boasts knights clad in armor atop warhorses, a scenario not far removed from Meng-Qing's expectations. In a feudal society, personal prowess equates to power, suggesting that humans are far stronger than goblins, despite the latter's potentially greater numbers. If Meng-Qing wishes to thrive, engaging with humans is the preferred strategy. Retreat is the least favorable option. Within the depths of the forest lie beings far mightier than goblins. Radish Big Stick speaks of elusive creatures that leap among the trees and minotaurs towering 2 or 3 goblins high. Not to mention bizarre plants capable of preying on the living. Surely, deeper still, even more perilous entities await. He can swiftly showcase exceptional intelligence, gaining a measure of influence within the Big Stick camp. A feat that should not be overly difficult given his current status. Even in the goblin realm, sages are revered. However, establishing a relatively amicable relationship with humans may prove far more challenging than anticipated. The human realm is reportedly offering bounties on goblins, creating a convoluted predicament. Is retreat into the forest the only viable strategy? Until the moonlight bathes the earth, Meng-Qing has yet to formulate a satisfactory plan. Having rested for a significant portion of the day, he does not yet feel overly fatigued. Contemplating, he steps out of his wooden hut into the open air. Goblin life is markedly simpler than that of humans. allowing ample time for sleep, and they are quite adept at it, reminiscent of beasts. After a refreshing breeze brushes against him, Meng Qing's mind finds tranquility, no matter how well-conceived a plan may be. Its efficacy can only be determined through execution. Regardless, he resolves to strive for influence within the Big Stick camp. He harbors no doubts about attaining such influence. The distinction lies in the methods, some more challenging than others, with outcomes varying upon success. The optimal strategy involves expanding the territory of the Big Stick camp and identifying more suitable food sources for goblins. Accomplishing these two tasks could elevate him to the second-in-command of the camp. Just below Radish Big Stick. Should he be bolder, he might gather intelligence on nearby human villages and orchestrate a raid. If successful, he could potentially supplant Radish Big Stick as the new leader of the camp. Yet, this notion is ultimately quelled by Meng Qing, for he genuinely desires to foster a positive relationship with humans, influenced by his former humanity and the undeniable fact that humans lead more prosperous lives than goblins. A lack of productivity is arguably the most detrimental trait of goblins. Were they to cultivate and care for perennial plants like chestnuts, which yield bountiful harvests annually, alongside some quick-growing vegetables, and engage in hunting and berry gathering, their lives would undoubtedly improve significantly. Instead, they currently exist in a state that is neither human nor beast, falling short even of the ancient human era of slash-and-burn agriculture, for goblins to become industrious, akin to the effort required for them to fly, would be a monumental challenge. This laziness appears to be ingrained, and it is unclear what methods might alter this reality to the northern edge of the jungle by the Great River. Numerous torches dispel the darkness of night. Many voices have grown hoarse in search of the 3 missing children. With a sigh of resignation, the aging village chief declares, "Let us return. Tomorrow we shall report this matter to the Lord, who will decide the course of action. It is regrettable that they discovered the absence too late. Night has settled in for an hour, and everyone has been busy all day, barely pausing to eat. Feeling hungry, exhausted, and weary, they have done all they could, yet the children remain unaccounted for. My child," cries a despairing farmer woman, her voice hoarse from weeping, as others stand at the jungle's edge, gazing helplessly at the river jungle that melds with the pitch-black night. Even if every adult in the village were to venture forth, they would only dare to search and call out at the jungle's edge, not daring to delve 200 meters into the thicket. The darkness is so profound now that the addition of more people into the jungle would be akin to a grain of sand cast into a great river, instantly swallowed whole. It must be the wretched goblin's doing. On the return journey, someone speaks up, and others join in a chorus of denunciation against the goblins, the race that has the most frequent contact with humans. Even in T. George, the Lord of the Wild Rose Barony, is a hereditary baron under the Kingdom of Flowers, but to the age of 46. He is considered a venerable elder in a world where ordinary folk regard 60 as a ripe old age. Thanks to the knightly bloodline of his ancestors that transcended human limits, he remains robust and vigorous, unlike the commoners who have already begun to falter in certain aspects by this age. As dawn broke, he rose from the alabaster-skinned belly of his concubine, opened the window, and gazed out from the highest tower of the castle that presides over Rose Town, surveying his domain. Observing the bustling servants within the castle and the steady flow of subjects on the streets below filled him with a sense of pride, akin to that of a victor in the game of life. While the common folk had been toiling for 2 or 3 hours, George had only just begun his breakfast, soft, sweet white bread slathered with butter and layered with thin slices of ham. The warm, fresh milk, sweetened with expensive cane sugar, was delightful, devoid of any unpleasant aftertaste. Juicy ribs cooked to a perfect medium, seasoned and dripping with savory juices, were wiped clean with silk cloth, an indulgence far beyond the reach of ordinary men. Even the dessert was a dish of meticulously washed and peeled grapes, sweet and succulent. George made no move to begin, and the others at the table hesitated to touch their knives. When he finally set down his cutlery, they all instinctively wiped their mouths with napkins, regardless of whether they had eaten their fill, though only his wife and children occupied the seats beside him. "The secretary is waiting for you in the hall." His wife spoke at the opportune moment, as George rose after finishing his dessert. George felt little interest in his aging first wife, though she proved to be a capable manager of the castle and its affairs. Moreover, The laws of the kingdom dictated that nobles could not dismiss their aging spouses. Otherwise, he would have long since replaced her with numerous younger ladies. The secretary, a trusted confidant of the lord, possessed skills such as demographic analysis, accounting, and drafting proclamations that were beyond the reach of both commoners and even many nobles. This position was highly coveted, while it might not rival the prowess of a formidable knight. Even knights treated secretaries with a measure of respect. George had inherited the title of baron from his father at the age of 35, having once held great esteem for the lordship. Unfortunately, the old man, a knight, had maintained remarkable vitality until his untimely death over a decade ago during a sudden monster uprising. Had it not been for that, George might still have been waiting for his turn to rule the Wild Rose Barony. In the initial years of his tenure, he was deeply invested in the affairs of his territory, yet it became evident that mere ideas were insufficient. Without foresight and strategic planning that surpassed the ordinary, his well-meaning thoughts often led to missteps. After several fruitless endeavors, disappointment consumed him, as he lamented the commoner's lack of intelligence. Incapable of executing even the simplest of commands, he also bemoaned the impoverished soil of the Wild Rose territory, which yielded little more than the modestly valuable rose petals for crafting floral fragrances. Furthermore, the land lacked the capacity to produce rose oil, thus benefiting other lords. Upon turning 40, George began to relish a more indulgent lifestyle. His once robust physique had become somewhat portly, and the armor and weapons he had once worn with pride had given way to opulent robes and a decorative scepter. As for physical training, it had likely been months since he had last engaged in such endeavors. After nearly 2 hours of waiting in the lord's castle, the secretary of the Wild Rose territory, Ivan, finally met his lord. He maintained a composed demeanor, for one does not secure the position of secretary for over 5 years without possessing certain adeptness. He succinctly reported the various matters of the territory over the past week, including the praises sung by the villages following the proclamation posted yesterday. Such flattery was certainly not the sentiment of the commoners. But who cared for the truth, as long as George was pleased? That was sufficient. The neighboring Thorn Barony's lord, a fool in Ivan's eyes, had ignored the migration of over 100 households from his territory to surrounding lands in the last 3 years. Just wait a few more years, George mused to himself, a cruel glint in his narrow eyes, that he won't even be able to produce a single knight. George was acutely aware of the vast disparity between a 10% tax and a 15% tax. While collecting an additional 10% might yield several more granaries of grain, it would also stir discontent among the subjects and introduce numerous risks. For instance, the grain supply next year, taxed similarly, would inevitably dwindle compared to the previous year. If the subjects went hungry, the birth rate would decline, slowing the growth of the population. Moreover, starving youths, who might have aspired to become knights, would lose their hopes entirely. In this monster-ridden world, only an abundance of knights could effectively safeguard the territory and herald a brighter future. As for the knights, their lances point solely at the good citizens. One more thing you ought to know. My lord, Ivan continued, 3 children under the age of 10 went missing from Ginkgo village yesterday. The entire village searched for them in the evening, yet they remained unaccounted for till daybreak. The villagers came to Rose Town to report the news. After relaying the information, Ivan stood by, awaiting George's response, well aware that this piece of news bore little significance to his lord. If George were in a foul mood, Ivan might choose to withhold it, lest it further darken the baron's spirits. Ginkgo village, near the great river forest. Could they have ventured into the woods? He pondered. After a night had passed, even if the children had been alive initially, their chances of survival were now slim. George was well acquainted with the villages under his jurisdiction. He had personally visited each during his early days as baron, spending considerable time there. This was not a common practice among noble lords, and the subjects regarded George as a benevolent lord, a sentiment that was not entirely insincere. George furrowed his brow. For the Wild Rose territory, the great river forest represented an insurmountable challenge. Much of his ambition had withered amidst the perils of that very forest. The shadowy woods, with their strange flora, omnipresent monsters, and myriad dangers, transformed what appeared to be a beautiful landscape into a treacherous death trap. Even a squad of knights venturing into the forest faced uncertain survival. Indeed, Ivan cautiously observed George's expression before formulating his response. What were they implying? Naturally, they were beseeching their merciful lord to send a knight to investigate the matter in light of Ginkgo Village's consistent punctuality in tax payments. For this, they were willing to cover the knight's travel expenses and offer 30 silver coins. Ivan told a little white lie. In reality, Ginkgo Village was prepared to provide 35 coins, and he was unconcerned that George might directly inquire with the villagers. Exposing his deceit that he asked for the extra 5 silver coins, he intended to pocket half. Using the other half to bribe a knight, 1 silver coin could buy approximately 30 pounds of coarse grain or 15 pounds of black bread, which equated to a month's worth of hard-earned income for an ordinary laborer. 35 silver coins would surely have been a collective effort from the entire village, aimed at securing the services of a formidable knight to eliminate the lurking dangers at the edges of Ginkgo Village. Preventing a repeat of past tragedies, take 8, no, 10 silver coins and seek out Sir Sack at the training ground. Ask for whom to send, let him decide, but do not neglect the daily matters of maintaining order in Rosetown. Compared to the trivial occurrences at the territory's borders, maintaining order in Rosetown was of far greater importance to George, as the tax revenue from commercial transactions belonged solely to him. Unlike the grain that had to be converted into gold coins for the kingdom biannually, typically 10 silver coins would scarcely secure the services of a powerful knight, especially in the treacherous forest. However, knights serving the Lord were bound by a natural obligation to fulfill their duties. Moreover, this venture came with remuneration, and the provisions would be shared, akin to a business trip funded by the public purse. For the knights of the Wild Rose Barony, including the commander, such an endeavor was relatively light work. Knights were not merely soldiers mounted on steeds. If that were the case, the Wild Rose Barony would boast 50 knights. In truth, had there truly been 50 knights, George's title would at the very least be that of a viscount. The selection of knights is a rare occurrence, akin to the Wild Rose territory, which boasts approximately 3,000 subjects, yet only yields a mere 15 knights of suitable age, among whom only 2 are female knights, the remainder being male. That a knight worthy of being addressed as sir by common folk must possess 3 essential attributes: a complete set of armor, a war steed, and the vital essence known as combat aura, none of which can be lacking. That a knight's great sword or lance, alongside a full suit of armor, would cost no less than 3 gold coins, equivalent to the entire lifetime earnings of an ordinary peasant who labors tirelessly for 30 years without sustenance. That a war horse capable of bearing the weight of both armor and knight is often even more costly than the complete set of equipment, rendering it a rare commodity. While the Wild Rose territory possesses about 50 horses, fewer than a third can be classified as true war steeds. The remainder consists largely of inferior mounts, unsuitable for battle due to inadequate strength, and are only fit for daily rides or pulling carts. In contrast to the monetary value of the former two, the combat aura is the true linchpin. Humans extract minute elements from food, flora, and the ethereal substances between earth and stars, which are invisible to the naked eye, and, through arcane methods, refine their physical forms. Those who excel may gain the power known as combat aura. Knights can use this aura to shield vital areas when danger approaches, akin to possessing additional lives. Unlike common soldiers who may be easily dispatched with a mere thrust of a spear, it was not uncommon for knights to engage in combat where their lances pierce the armor of their adversaries, yet fail to breach their combat aura. Naturally, those with a more potent aura possess greater strength, effortlessly dispatching lower-tier knights with ease. The hierarchy among knights is distinctly apparent. Entry-level knights can only channel their aura to enhance their physical defenses and attributes when under attack. But they are not invincible. In the face of siege weaponry, such as catapults, they can still be slain, and it is not rare for ordinary knights to fall to arrows or be overwhelmed by a throng of common soldiers. Those who advance to the intermediate level of knighthood can project their aura externally, enhancing the lethality of their strikes, while also improving their defensive capabilities compared to entry-level knights. Intermediate knights are formidable adversaries, capable of defeating 10 foes barehanded, a claim not made lightly. Even a massive boulder can be cleaved asunder by their weaponry through sheer force. This tier of strength allows them to momentarily manifest their aura into a tangible form. launching surprise attacks that inflict grievous harm, rendering them the absolute backbone of the knightly order. Even minor nobles would not dare to assume superiority in their presence. Knights of higher echelons are a rarity even within the entirety of the Flower Kingdom. High-tier knights can transmute their aura into solid armor and weaponry, rendering both arrows and blades inconsequential threats. They can claim the heads of generals amidst a sea of foes without impossibility. Their presence instills a formidable dread, as even when encircled, they find no true dead end. They can momentarily activate their aura to take flight, easily crossing rivers, though mountains may pose a greater challenge. As long as they remain within the golden period of strength, a knight's power continues to ascend. It was indeed Evan, the scribe, who had come in person rather than merely sending a word through an envoy. At the training grounds not far from the perimeter of the Wild Rose Castle, the stationed entry-level high-ranking knight commander, Sack, displayed a smile upon seeing Evan brought in by the soldiers, compared to the higher-ranking Baron George. He preferred dealings with Evan, for the latter was a man of intellect. A minor incident had occurred in the village below, which had caught the Baron's attention, prompting him to send specific instructions. Commander Sack, please dispatch a knight, along with an attendant, to visit Ginkgo village at your earliest convenience, to ascertain the cause behind the disappearance of 3 young boys. Should there be any monsters lurking at the fringes of the Great River Forest, they must be swiftly dealt with. This is a reward of 10 silver coins from the Baron. Evan wasted no time on pleasantries and immediately conveyed the purpose of his visit, revealing a small black pouch that fell into Sack's hands. Sack, after a squeeze of the pouch, noticed a broader smile appear on his face. It contained more than just the promised 10 silver coins, with an additional 2 presumably belonging to Evan as a knight. It is imperative to swiftly eliminate any monsters that dare to harm the subjects of the territory. Please inform the Baron that Sack will undoubtedly dispatch the most elite knight, ensuring completion of the task within 3 days. Then I shall rest easy. Haha. No need to trouble Commander Sack further. Until we meet again. Until we meet again. The gathering of a dozen knights possesses a power greater than the mere sum of its parts, sufficient to form a knightly squad capable of a combat or a charge. During such a charge, a portion of the collective aura will coalesce around the foremost vanguard, amplifying their strength manifold. Even a massive boulder would not withstand the charge of 10 or more knights, instead being shattered and scattered. The aura expended in this charge is merely a fraction of each knight's reserves. Baron George, as the Lord, harbors no concern that these knights might, in a moment of fervor, conceive thoughts of usurping their noble masters. Any knight serving a noble is bound by a formal and enforceable contract. Generally, should the noble breach the agreement, it bears little consequence, should it be the knight. However, their painstakingly cultivated limit on combat aura may drastically diminish, potentially rendering them unable to ever enhance their prowess again. This distinction underscores the substantial gap that persists between knights and true nobility. The criteria for a knight to ascend to nobility are few, with military achievements being the most straightforward and accessible path. However, the human kingdoms have enjoyed a prolonged period of tranquility. The Queen of the Flower Kingdom ascended to the throne at the tender age of 19 and has reigned for 11 years. Having shed her youthful naivety, she now exudes an extraordinary charm. The market for the kingdom's specialty plant essences has proliferated throughout human realms, with no ambitions for expansion, but rather a focus on stability. Combined with the Flower Queen's unparalleled diplomatic finesse, neighboring human kingdoms have forged amicable relations with the Flower Kingdom. Countless nobles have squandered fortunes in hopes of merely glimpsing the Flower Queen, only to be left wanting. It is foreseeable that any force harboring intentions against the Flower Kingdom would meet a dismal fate. For the foreseeable future, none will dare to covet it, barring unforeseen circumstances. There exists a task requiring travel to Ginkgo village, where 3 young boys have gone missing. The objective is to investigate their whereabouts, ensuring the living are found and the dead are accounted for. Should any monsters be active at the fringes of the Great River Forest, it would be prudent to slay a few to instill peace of mind. The reward for this task is 10 silver coins. With a deadline of 3 days, commencing today until noon the day after tomorrow, failure to return by then will be deemed a failure of the mission. Who will take on this task? Gathering the knights already patrolling and training within the drill grounds, Sack relayed the Lord's directive. The expressions of the knights, men and women alike, were markedly different from those of ordinary folk, with some eager and enthusiastic, while others appeared listless and disinterested. Have you all yet to decide? Then I shall appoint someone. After a half-minute of silence with no volunteers forthcoming, Sack cleared his throat to prompt the assembly. Regardless, given the task's association with the perilous Great River Forest, caution is advisable. I will go. A young knight among them stepped forward, his youth evident even among knights. Indeed, he was Hood, the Baroness' nephew, who had been a knight for less than 3 years. However, with 2 sons of Baron George, Hood was unlikely to inherit the baronial title. Thus, he sought to achieve sufficient military accolades during his lifetime. Even if he could not ascend to nobility, commanding a village would still be within reach. Ahem, this task is not to be taken lightly. It is wiser for an intermediate knight to take the lead. Hood, you need not contend for this. Allow me to take it. Receiving a discreet glance from Sack, the elder knight, Curtis, stepped forth. Having surpassed the golden age for knights, it is unlikely he will ever reach the ranks of an entry-level high-ranking knight. Yet he has managed to fare well in the Baron's service, having once served George's father. Then it shall be Knight Curtis. That is settled. Sack exhaled in relief, for although Hood was not a direct descendant of Baron George, he still bore a significant familial connection. Should Hood encounter misfortune during this mission, Sack knew the Baroness' wrath would likely fall upon him. Hood, being young, wore his emotions on his sleeve, revealing his disappointment. Patrolling Rosetown hardly compared to the thrill of mounting a steed, vanquishing monsters, and relishing the cheers of commoners. Perhaps he might even enjoy a blissful night with a comely village maiden. Bring your weaponry and armor, and provisions for a single meal. Upon reaching Ginkgo village, they will provide sustenance. Ultimately, one must proceed with caution in all matters. After all, your dear Lily has yet to find a suitor. Once others had dispersed, Sack and Curtis strolled side by side across the training grounds, basking in the admiration of the ordinary soldiers, while Sack imparted his final instructions. Sack was not a knight born of the Wild Rose territory, but rather one who had journeyed there from distant lands approximately 7 or 8 years prior. In this perilous world, only knights possessed the prowess to travel great distances. At that time, Sack was on the verge of ascending to the rank of a low-tier high knight. Although he encountered numerous challenges during his travels, they did not pose significant obstacles for him. However, should his adversaries be monstrous creatures, even the most favorable odds would warrant caution. Even mid-tier knights would hesitate to claim they could venture into areas rife with monsters and emerge unscathed. Sack, knowing his own limitations, dared not boast of his abilities. Having narrowly achieved mid-tier status, he had no confidence in traversing the Great River jungle, where dangers lurked in the depths, many of which remained unexplored. Goodness, can you refrain from being such a pessimist? In the past 5 years, I have visited the Great River jungle at least 8 times, and the worst trouble I encountered was merely a minor goblin tribe. With a bit of effort, I could surely return with 20 goblin heads, Curtis confidently asserted, despite not matching Sack's prowess. Born and raised in the Wild Rose territory, Curtis was intimately familiar with every village and its surrounding terrain, making him the most suitable knight for this task. I wish you success in slaying the monsters and bringing glory to our kin. I eagerly anticipate the sight of you returning victorious, astride a steed adorned with goblin heads. When that day comes, drinks at the Ed Dwarf Tavern shall be on me. Sack boomed with hearty laughter, which Curtis echoed, for a knight certainly had reason to be confident in his strength. Approximately 15 minutes later, Curtis mounted his 4th warhorse of his knightly career and, with the help of his retainers, donned his armor, the heavy knight's lance now secured at his side point 2 attendants. Riding lesser steeds, followed closely behind, bearing Curtis's spare weapons and armor. The role of knight's attendant held great potential, as many high-ranking knights began their journeys as attendants, forging their skills through countless battles. Only knights tasked with combat donned armor. Under ordinary circumstances, no one would wear cumbersome steel armor merely for show. As the trio galloped away from the training grounds along the streets of Rosetown, they certainly drew the attention of vendors and passers-by, who were well acquainted with Knight Curtis and speculated on the nature of the event at hand. That in this world, where information was scarce, even the birth of a child or the slaughter of a sheep became a topic of discussion over meals. The exploits of knights, wielders of such formidable power, were always the subject of eager conversation among the common folk. I heard from the villagers of Ginkgo village this morning that 3 children under 10 had been abducted by monsters, the wretched beasts. Oh, how tragic. They were barely 10 years old. Thankfully, we reside in town. The countryside is far too perilous. Indeed. Regardless, those accursed monsters would never dare approach Rosetown. Otherwise, they would find their heads mounted on stakes. May Lord Curtis slay many of those fiends for our vengeance. As the moon hung low in the night sky, exhaustion enveloped Mengqing, and in the increasingly silent evening, he pondered for a long while before finally succumbing to fatigue and retreating to his wooden cottage for sleep. However, he had not slumbered long before being startled awake by urgent calls. Initially disoriented, he quickly regained his senses amidst the increasingly frantic cries of goblins. Are we under night attack? Mengqing's face darkened upon hearing the cries. From the words of the stout goblin, he had gathered a general idea of the nature of the creatures attacking. They were beings of far greater strength than goblins, yet unlike ordinary creatures. They thrived in packs. They resembled wolves living in the jungle, and for these carnivorous fiends, even their kin could become prey. Grabbing the rough wooden club by his bedside, Mengqing flung open the door. The goblins possessed remarkable night vision, and even in the dead of night, with only the moonlight filtering through the treetops, Mengqing found his sight to be quite clear. He immediately spotted agile figures leaping about the massive trees at the camp's edge, accompanied by the cacophony of goblin shrieks and cries of despair. Where is Radish? Mengqing knew he stood no chance against even a solitary fiend. Whether in his past life or present, he had always acknowledged this truth. Thus, upon seeing multiple fiendish silhouettes, his instinct was to seek the safety of Radish the Stout, the strongest force in their camp. Only by his side could he feel secure, amidst the chaos of the camp. Mengqing quickly found Radish the Stout, who stood in a clearing wielding a hammer, warding off the fiends that dared to approach. That a smile broke across Mengqing's face. However, that smile faded upon seeing a nearby body, belly torn open, lying lifeless. The very figure that had been in truth, the fool was only marginally superior to the beast. The arrowheads, fashioned from the teeth of unknown creatures, had been honed to a razor-sharp edge, rivaling the potency of steel. The arrow shot by Mengqing Chu did not achieve a significant victory, yet it successfully intercepted the creature's assault, forcing it to adjust its form mid-air, thereby retreating from a confrontation with the formidable Radish club and darting back to the safety of the trees. Whoosh, meow. An arrow grazed the head of the Radish club, striking the creature that had just leaped down, eliciting a pained cry. The anger that had briefly flared on the Radish club's face dissipated, replaced by a cruel determination as it swung its spiked mace, pummeling the fallen creature's head until it was unrecognizable. Arrows. With newfound confidence from the success of the third arrow, Mengqing readied his bow again. Though he dared not glance back, he released the final arrow, which sailed past the creature's abdomen, disappearing into the shadowy depths of the forest. The injured creature trembled before collapsing, but before the Radish club could approach, it endured its pain and retreated swiftly, no longer daring to ascend the trees, vanishing from the goblin's sight. The previously disheartened goblins found their spirits lifted by the scent of the creature's blood in the air. Goblins are peculiar beings. Though their individual combat prowess may only measure at 2.5, when gathered in numbers, they could multiply their strength manifold. Witnessing the previously timid goblins brandishing their wooden clubs and shouting as they charged forward, some even attempting to climb trees to engage in battle, the remaining 3 to 5 creatures glanced at their twitching companion's body on the ground, letting out reluctant wails before disappearing into the treetops. Their figures quickly lost amidst the rustling leaves that Having struggled valiantly against the wicked creatures, the goblins cheered in celebration of their victory. Mengqing merely smirked, opting not to join in the festivities. The sight of dozens of goblins struggling against fewer than 10 creatures was disheartening. Had it not been for the Radish Club's intervention, they might still be embroiled in a lengthy battle. Should the Radish Club become fatigued and fall prey to the creature's relentless assaults, the remaining goblins would undoubtedly scatter, leaving Mengqing in peril as well. Despite the radish club showing no signs of fatigue, its breath came in heavy gasps that it cast aside its bloodied mace and approached the lifeless goblin body that others had chosen to forget. After confirming the unfortunate creature was truly deceased, it closed its eyes. The loss of a son did not seem to burden the radish club for long, and Meng Qing refrained from offering condolences, instead engaging it in conversation. Upon learning that the creatures had been struck by Meng Qing's arrows, the radish club expressed immense joy, heartily patting Meng Qing on the shoulder in satisfaction, muttering something about the prowess of elven blood. If the elves were aware of his mixed goblin heritage, they might come swiftly to eliminate him. After all, elves are renowned as true archers, and his modest skills would pale in comparison. Meng Qing's mouth twitched. He had almost forgotten about his elven lineage. Reflecting on his recent experiences, he pondered the ease with which he had drawn his bow, an occurrence that was unusual under normal circumstances. Perhaps his elven blood had indeed played a role, granting him a passive skill related to archery. After the battlefield was cleared, all goblins were summoned. Meng Qing surveyed the condition of the survivors and sighed in relief. Fewer than 5 goblins had truly perished at the hands of the creatures. Most had merely sustained minor injuries, such as bites or the loss of an ear. For goblins raised in a rough environment, this hardly constituted a grievous disability. Sustaining such losses during a night raid by creatures far stronger than themselves was a surprisingly favorable outcome. Far better than Meng Qing had anticipated. He had expected at least a dozen goblins to fall. Perhaps the goblins' infrequent bathing had contributed to their tougher skin? Why did the creatures choose to raid their tribe at night? Following their battle, Meng Qing felt no lingering resistance in referring to the tribe as he had truly become a goblin. Despite his past as a human, he still retained a sense of pride and dignity from his human heritage. Yet he was beginning to genuinely embrace his identity as a goblin. The moon was nearing fullness. The radish club gazed upward, and Meng Qing followed suit. Through the gaps in the tree canopy, he beheld a slightly imperfect full moon that, if calculated according to Earth's calendar, it was likely around the 12th or 13th day of the lunar month. Did the creatures always attack during a full moon? Meng Qing recalled the legends of werewolves and shook his head. How could canines, in this situation, possibly relate? In truth, during nights of bright moonlight, the moonlight creatures could absorb and transform that lunar energy to heal their wounds. Thus, the creatures were most aggressive and dangerous under the radiant moonlight. In the days leading up to the full moon, they would significantly expand their territory. Even if injured, as long as they had breath, they could recover by that night. The Radish Club shared secrets unknown to Meng Qing, sending a tremor through his heart. Lunar energy? It sounded almost magical. Did this world possess magic? After a few more exchanges, Meng Qing felt a mix of joy and apprehension. Moonlight creatures were rare, akin to the sages of the goblin tribe. Carnivorous creatures did not live in the same numbers as goblins. Their strength did not allow for such large groups. For this was the jungle, an unpredictable and perilous jungle. How could one harness the power of moonlight? If the creatures could absorb lunar energy, might they also be able to absorb the sun's power? After all, moonlight is merely a reflection of sunlight. Meng Qing posed his question. The Radish Club looked at him as if he were a fool. The moon goddess and the sun god are entirely different deities. How could they be the same? I was just inquiring that I wish to know if we can absorb the power of moonlight. Meng Qing scratched his bald head, realizing how ignorant he was. It was clear that even goblins were aware of divine beings in this world. Goblins are typically bald, their hair akin to fine fuzz that hardly counts, thriving in the jungle without needing to grow hair to shield themselves from the sun's rays, a difference that could be explained by evolution. Alas, how could one be so young and yet so bald? Perhaps the moonlight creatures possess the answer. You seem to have many questions today. Have you awakened the power within your bloodline? The Radish Club observed Meng Qing with newfound interest, causing him to shiver. No. It's likely the human bloodline is starting to show its effects. Soon, you will reach adulthood. I hope a true awakening occurs then. Before Meng Qing could respond, the Radish Club shook its head. Meng Qing remained silent, having gleaned much from their conversation and recognizing that the Radish Club was not as simple-minded as most goblins. Perhaps it was a change brought about by his human blood. Or perhaps there were other reasons that, in any case, it was not a bad thing. For now, he still needed the protection of the Radish Club. Despite having faced a night raid, the Goblin tribe had seemingly failed to learn from the experience. It was only thanks to Meng Qing's suggestion that the Radish Club decided to post goblins on watch. Otherwise, another night raid would leave them sleepless, and without the creatures needing to attack again. The goblins would soon find themselves forced to migrate to escape the threat, which was no easy feat in the jungle. The few goblins assigned to guard duty were displeased but dared not voice their discontent. Exhausted from the arduous battle, the other goblins returned home. Collapsing into sleep as if nothing had occurred as for the deceased, they would remain where they lay for now. They could be buried tomorrow without delay. This was a different world, a realm fraught with danger that he had nearly perished within a day of arriving. Such occurrences must not be allowed to continue. The world may be vast, but one's life is paramount. Lying in bed, Meng Qing found himself restless, unable to sleep due to the looming threat of the creature's night raid. It served as a wake-up call, reminding him that he was no longer in a peaceful city, and that in the face of danger, there were no emergency numbers to call to live or to die. Ultimately, Meng Qing succumbed to sleep, closing his eyes and navigating the trials of his first night in this foreign realm. In the morning, upon awakening, Meng Qing felt a slight ache in his arms. The danger from the previous night had overshadowed everything else, and while drawing his bow had felt effortless, it was a different story now. Yet the after-effects lingered. His current goblin form remained feeble, perhaps even less powerful than that of a 10-year-old human child on this new day. The second since arriving in this foreign realm, it was time to endeavor to alter everything within his grasp. Beginning with the bow he had employed yesterday, to escape the jungle, one must first possess a handy weapon for self-defense. After a moment of contemplation seated at the edge of his bed, Meng Qing resolved firmly. He had always acted upon his thoughts, for lofty ideals are but futile dreams without the impetus of action. Pushing open the rudimentary, drafty wooden door, Meng Qing inhaled the air of the camp bathed in morning light. Faintly detecting the lingering scent of blood, he traversed the camp. He garnered an abundance of admiring glances and gleaned the precise number of goblins present, 87 goblins. This count included nursing infants and elderly goblins who had recently lost their teeth and were nearing the end of their lives. However, the two aged goblins of the camp were not sages. Their intelligence, while notably above that of the average goblin, did not impress Meng Qing. The goblin community resembled small family units, typically comprising adult couples with 3 to 6 children. Goblins had significantly shorter lifespans than humans, yet their fertility was remarkable, with a gestation period of merely 3 months, usually yielding 2 or 3 offspring. The complications during childbirth that had plagued humanity for centuries posed no threat to goblins, as newborn goblins were pitifully small, akin to blind puppies. The mortality rate before reaching maturity was alarmingly high. Meng Qing learned this from conversing with the elderly goblins. Goblins reached adulthood at 6 years, with approximately 30% perishing before this milestone. Living to the age of 25 was considered a long life among goblins, exemplified by the 2 aged goblins in the camp. One was 24, and the other 28. So, I am merely 5.5 years old. How frustrating. Yet, goblins have lifespans of only 2 to 3 decades. How exceedingly brief, suddenly realizing he might have only 20 years to live. Meng Qing was engulfed by an indescribable dread, the inevitable fate that all sentient beings, wise or otherwise, fear yet cannot escape. Death. The journey from life to death is an irreversible path. Time erodes all. Even deities may fade into obscurity within the vast river of history. The sun, moon, and stars will ultimately meet their demise. Living beings experience existence, sensing themselves, perceiving their surroundings, hearing the symphony of life, savoring the sustenance that invigorates their bodies, and touching the faces of their beloved. Upon death, consciousness is lost, rendering one unable to see, hear, smell, or touch anything anymore. They have traversed their brief journey of life, their names lingering only momentarily in the world, until forgotten by the last living soul who knew them at that point. The final traces of their existence will be erased, indistinguishable from the lives of ants and insects. Embody the Tao was the path chosen by countless heroes before Meng Qing's crossing. A path fraught with challenges and obstacles. A hero may leave but a trivial mark upon the world, yet true heroes are indelible. Even after a millennium, their names endure as long as humanity exists. This is another form of immortality. To live as a hero, to die as a ghostly figure. Meng Qing murmured in a tongue incomprehensible to goblins, finally grasping the profound meaning of these words. Lost in contemplation. Before long, the news of Meng Qing's newfound ability to speak an unusual language spread throughout the Big Stick camp, where even a whisper could be heard by half the inhabitants. The fact that Meng Qing possessed elven blood was no secret. All goblins in the camp were aware, amplified by the boisterous proclamations of those who had witnessed his remarkable archery the previous day. Thus, his ambitions of gaining fame and authority, which had yet to commence, were already 99% realized, merely awaiting his vocal declaration to complete the endeavor. It appeared that becoming a hero was unattainable. But what of being a goblin hero? What of being a hero of the jungle? A soldier who does not aspire to become a general is not a good soldier, and a goblin who does not wish to be strong is not a worthy goblin. I, Meng Qing, squandered over 20 years of my previous life in aimlessness. It is time to awaken. What of goblins? A hammer can still crush your weaknesses. Emerging from his reverie, Meng Qing perceived the goblins around him in an entirely new light. Perhaps this was the experience of hope, of seeing a direction. Even the air felt refreshingly invigorating. Yet, what was this overwhelming stench of foul feet? Upon opening his eyes and inhaling deeply, he immediately held his breath, scanning his surroundings to find a throng of goblins encircling him. Given that goblins only gathered moisture when it rained, their collective odor was beyond description. Scatter, all of you. Do you still wish to feast on demon flesh? Seeing Meng Qing's face morph into a grimace, the goblins dispersed in a frenzy at the sight of the towering club raised by the stout goblin. Only a few remained behind. Meng Qing took a deep breath. Goblins have keen senses, and in certain situations, that can be a disadvantage. The demon slain beneath the stout goblin's club had been skinned, its bones removed, and its flesh tossed into the only iron pot at the center of the camp. Meng Qing had seen this pot the day before, marveling at the goblin's apparent mastery of ironworking, only to fall silent upon learning it had been pilfered from a human village. The pot was substantial, ample enough to stew a demon. The goblins who had scattered formed small groups to scour the vicinity for anything edible, knowing that the meat would take time to cook. In truth, the portion each goblin would receive was meager. But at least everyone, young and old, would have a taste of meat broth. The average goblin, a taste of meat every 10 days or so, was a blessing. The deceased goblin from the previous night was no longer visible upon Meng Qing's awakening. They had not been consumed, but rather interred in the communal graveyard designated for goblins. Meng Qing felt a sense of relief. He could not fathom partaking in cannibalism. Initially, though otherwise. I fear there may be foolish subjects who might attempt to flee under the cover of night. They dare. Break their legs. The formidable Radish Club suddenly rose, his countenance fierce. Perhaps they would not. But better to be prepared. Uncle should heed my proposal before dismissing it. Meng Qing felt helpless. While Radish Club was formidable in combat, his intellect often resembled that of a mischievous child, only occasionally displaying extraordinary wisdom. Radish Club, compliant, sat down and perked up his ears to listen attentively. For him, contemplation was a strenuous endeavor. However, when it came to making choices based on other suggestions, he found it rather effortless. The experience of the demon raid last night had instilled a sense of crisis in me. Perhaps that was the reason for my sudden awakening. Such occurrences could very well happen again. What if next time the attackers numbered not 7 or 8 demons, but 70 or 80? Indeed, under normal circumstances, it is unlikely for so many demons to congregate, yet even a mere 20 or 30 demons could easily annihilate the Radish Club's camp. Uncle, can you fend off 5 demons at once? Could you withstand 10 or 20? Certainly not. Even against 7 or 8, I would have to retreat in disarray. In fact, in such a scenario, the ultimate outcome would be a dead end. Radish Club shook his head repeatedly. A solitary demon could be dealt with by 3 or 5 goblins, but once their numbers increased, allowing them to attack in turns, the goblins would stand no chance, Radish Club included. Thus, the immediate priority is to enhance everyone's combat capabilities. Without exception. Yesterday, I found a short bow quite satisfactory, but compared to the archery skills I currently possess, it is woefully outdated and an insufficient quantity, while we may not excel in strength or speed. If we can assemble a regiment of archers, we should possess the capability to fight back, regardless of how many demons come our way. Meng Qing articulated what he deemed the most pressing matter for the Radish Club's camp. To which Radish Club nodded vigorously after some contemplation. To be honest, bows and arrows are quite suitable for goblins with limited strength. All it requires is drawing the bow and releasing the arrow. Anyone capable of pulling back the bowstring can give it a try. And surprisingly, the lethality is not to be underestimated in this regard. Even the spear, reputed as the king of weapons, cannot surpass the bow and arrow. Meng Qing's assertion that he could improve the short bow was met with Radish Club's unwavering belief. Even deep within the forest, tales of the elves' exceptional marksmanship had reached his ears. Moreover, he had witnessed the prowess of half-elves firsthand, their archery skills nothing short of astounding. This thought. He shuddered, seemingly recalling the harrowing days when he was oppressed by his elder brother, who was anything but goblin-like. The half-elf, more ferocious than a female leopard, could only be subdued by his elder brother. Meng Qing refrained from overwhelming Radish Club with too many suggestions at once. For goblins are notoriously poor at retaining information. They can only absorb one piece of information at a time. Even after hearing Meng Qing's third proposal, Radish Club began to mumble, occasionally counting on his fingers to repeat what Meng Qing had previously stated, clearly showing signs of forgetfulness. In the heart of the jungle, lacking or in the means to smelt it, wooden bows remained the Radish clan's primary choice. Yet, the disparity between wooden bows can be immense. A well-crafted strong bow made from superior timber can deliver lethal force from 100 paces, capable of piercing through trees as thick as a thigh. The least effective, of course, is the wooden bow currently utilized by the Radish Club, whose arrows may struggle to breach the bark of a tree trunk. Today, the atmosphere within the tribe struck ordinary goblins as peculiar. Many received orders unlike their usual food-gathering tasks. They were to seek out straight, resilient wooden sticks, the kind that would not snap even when bent double. Meng Qing was not well acquainted with the surroundings of the Radish Club's camp, but this did not hinder him from overseeing the goblins' industrious efforts as they scurried back to the camp with various types of wood, selecting the most suitable materials for crafting bows and arrows. The production of excellent bow limbs requires considerable time. Yet the Radish Club currently lacked such a luxury. They could not afford to indulge in a 3-year bow-making process. Should they manage to create such a bow, it is likely that even Radish Club, the strongest goblin in the camp, would struggle to draw it. After sifting through dozens of types of wood, Meng Qing chose 2 varieties as the primary materials for the bow limbs. This choice was based on the growth range and availability of the materials. One type, resembling bamboo but with an exceedingly long growth cycle, was rare and possessed significant hardness, requiring considerable strength to draw the bow. Thus, it could only be wielded by the more robust goblins in the tribe. The other type, widely distributed and with good resilience, was suitable for ordinary goblins. With a command from Meng Qing, within an hour, enough wood to craft 100 bow limbs had been brought back to the camp by the goblins. In the forest, timber was plentiful. Meng Qing observed that most ordinary goblins were still using stone axes, with a few wielding bone axes, and the wood they brought back was uneven, resembling something gnawed by a dog. However, this posed no problem for Meng Qing, as fire could easily rectify the situation. He had witnessed the goblins' fearlessness towards fire just the previous day, a trait shared by intelligent races. Last night, some goblins had even utilized flames to combat the demons. In contrast to goblins, demons exhibited a profound fear of fire, likely due to their long-term habitation in the jungle, which ingrained a genetic aversion to flames, as wildfires in the forest could indeed be catastrophic. Taking a length of vine, Meng Qing cut it to a suitable size and then used charcoal to mark each piece of wood suitable for crafting bow limbs as he engaged in this task. Many curious goblins gathered around, their limited intellect struggling to comprehend his actions, yet instinctively feeling a sense of reverence. Once the marks were drawn, the next steps were entrusted to Radish Club, who would lead the ordinary goblins in the process. The flames could scorch away the excess wood, and the charred wood could easily be trimmed to uniform lengths. With ample wood available, even some loss would be inconsequential. The procurement of bow limbs was the least challenging aspect of crafting a wooden bow. The subsequent task would be arrows. The forest was home to many birds with feathers, yet feathers were difficult to preserve for long periods, and since birds typically dwelled in the treetops, Mengqing had abandoned the idea of creating feathered arrows from the outset, opting instead to craft winged feather arrows. These arrows did not require the elusive bird feathers. Instead, they needed a suitable hollowed-out end, utilizing the inwardly concave groove to create vortex resistance, ensuring stable flight. Their accuracy would far surpass that of unfeathered wooden arrows, and once the technique was mastered, mass production would be entirely feasible. The most challenging aspect of crafting a bow was the bowstring. The toughness and elasticity of the bowstring directly impacted the bow's lethality. A single thin and elastic material could eliminate 99% of potential choices. However, when Mengqing inquired about bowstring materials, he received an unexpectedly delightful answer from Radish Club. To his astonishment, the Radish Club possessed the very material he sought for crafting bowstrings, and in considerable abundance. The green silkworm, a true herbivore, produces silk akin to that of spiders, but does not weave webs, as it has no need for webs to hunt. Its silk is primarily used to suspend its body, allowing for rapid relocation to evade various predators. After all, the plump green silkworm possesses only a mouth capable of consuming tender leaves and buds, rendering it quite harmless. The silk of the green silkworm is fine, yet remarkably resilient, remaining elastic even when dirted, unlike spider silk. When Radish Club proudly presented a large bundle of green silkworm silk, thick as his waist and exceeding 3 meters in length, Mengqing was left speechless. Upon learning that the green silkworm silk had been collected by the tribe's elder long ago, Mengqing couldn't help but exclaim that it was the perfect natural material for bowstrings. He found it hard to believe that the elder had amassed such a quantity of green silkworm silk without harboring ambitions for conquest. With this green silkworm silk, the dilemma that had plagued Mengqing was swiftly resolved. After pulling on a strand of green silkworm silk with all his might, Mengqing was immensely satisfied. Weighing 5 or 6 pounds, it was evident that the resilience of the silk capable of suspending such weight was remarkable. A 10-centimeter strand could stretch to 15 centimeters without showing any signs of breaking, and it only snapped when pulled to double its original length. Even when twisted into 4 strands, it required considerable effort for Radish Club to break it, sufficiently filling the gap for the most essential bowstring and bow dash making noon. The demon meat soup was finally ready, and all the goblins eagerly drank from their wooden bowls, savoring the hearty concoction. It would be best to acquire a toxin that induces paralysis upon contact with blood or causes uncontrolled bleeding, whether from a plant or an animal. I shall leave that to you, dear uncle, as I have faith in your capabilities. The demon flesh has long since been simmered to a pulp, and the central area of the great stick camp is a well-trodden expanse, with only a few resilient weeds remaining obstinately low, posing no risk of igniting a fire. In truth, even as autumn wanes, it is exceedingly difficult to ignite the forest with mere ordinary flames. Genuine forest fires are typically instigated by natural disasters or occur during exceptional weather conditions with strong winds. Truly a descendant of the Great Stick Camp. Upon hearing this, Radish Great Stick felt no embarrassment. Rather, he beamed with delight. The Great Stick Camp, having been established here for many years, is well aware of the locations of toxic substances in which poisons possess the greatest lethality. Such knowledge constitutes invaluable survival experience, hard-won through the sacrifices of those who came before. After the entire tribe had enjoyed a hearty meal, they were invigorated, and not a single goblin could immediately succumb to slumber after feasting. Under the watchful eye of the overseer's vine whip, they diligently toiled away. The crafting of bow arms requires time, and any adult goblin who has not suffered loss of limbs was summoned to labor. Even the juvenile goblins were assigned the task of gathering suitable wood strips for arrow production from the underbrush. Such wood is exceedingly common in the forest, with a sizable thicket just a few hundred meters from the camp, easily felled with a swift swing of a stone axe. Diligent hands can indeed change the world, but what Mengqing currently requires is not a transformation of the world, but rather the crafting of dozens, if not hundreds, of bows and arrows that surpass the ordinary. Thus, even as he directed goblins, whose nature inclines toward laziness. By the time dusk settled, the production of bows and arrows was nearing completion. Thousands of arrows had been hewn, and around 60 or 70 bow bodies, with one end bound with 6 strands of green silkworm silk bowstring, were taking shape, with several already fully formed and undergoing trial shots by Meng-Ching and Radish Greatstick for final adjustments. Initially, many goblins were reluctant to partake in such overtime tasks. However, witnessing the imminent emergence of the final product stirred within them a sense of collective pride, an atmosphere seldom felt within the tribe. In such a spirit, even if the overseer were to leave, the normally indolent goblins would dare not to rest while their peers toiled industriously. Such behavior would invite scorn, for goblins too possess a sense of pride. The remarkably resilient wood, after being placed within a mold fashioned from bundled wood strips for an entire afternoon, had warped into a distinct wave-like shape. Once subjected to flame to expel moisture, it quickly solidified. In this state, the bow arms would be difficult to revert to their original straight form in a short time, though after several hundred pulls, they would gradually lose elasticity, necessitating continual adjustments. Those tasks would be addressed in the future. What Meng-Ching required before nightfall was for every goblin, young and old, at the Great Stick Camp to possess a wooden bow and at least 30 arrows. With a whoosh, the wind feather arrow, with its tail end carved into a groove, was released, emitting an inexplicable whistling sound. The goblins of the Great Stick Camp were well acquainted with this sound, even feeling an inexplicable thrill upon hearing it. Accompanied by an urge to nock an arrow, the wooden arrow, sharpened at the tip but lacking an arrowhead, flew steadily and struck the target marked on the thick tree trunk with charcoal. Once Meng-Ching lowered the wooden bow, the air was filled with the goblins' raucous cries. Yet, the once jarring cacophony now brought joy to Meng-Ching, as the bow's adjustments had finally reached completion. All that remained was to string the remaining bow arms according to the template. The calibration of the arrows had already been initiated, with a rudimentary short bow capable of determining the optimal groove, opening position, and depth after several hundred shots. This was not as daunting as one might imagine. In the world before Meng-Ching's arrival, wind feather arrows had been established equipment since the Tang and Song dynasties. If it were truly too challenging, how could such consumables number in the tens or hundreds of thousands? The chariot of the sun god vanished beyond the western horizon, and in the blink of an eye, the jungle turned dim. Fortunately, goblins possess keen night vision, and after nearly a day of labor, they rubbed their sore arms and waists, chattering excitedly during and after dinner about the day's experiences. The sorrow of being ambushed by demons at night had long since dissipated. And truth be told, many goblins eagerly awaited the arrival of more unwary demons that very night, for the Great Stick Camp now boasted over 70 wooden bows capable of inflicting damage at a range exceeding 30 paces. Radish Greatstick was in high spirits during dinner, not merely due to the food or the day's addition of dozens of bows and arrows, but rather at the unexpected awakening of Meng-Ching. He felt an overwhelming joy, believing that soon he could truly relinquish the burdensome yet seemingly glorious title of leader. Each morning, dozens, if not hundreds, of goblins gazed at him with eager anticipation, presenting him with various trivial matters. Even the most mundane of tasks, which would inevitably lead to overwhelming frustration over time. Wooden bow, capable of launching arrows. Quality, ordinary. Wooden arrow, can be launched by the wooden bow. Quality, ordinary. These two attributes, invisible to other goblins, were revealed to Meng-Ching through his detection skill upon observing the completed wooden bow. With the detection skill at his disposal, he could instantly identify any issues with the bows, which proved exceedingly convenient. After darkness fell, Meng-Ching remained unsatisfied, hastily consuming a few berries to satiate his hunger before continuing to labor alongside a dozen goblins, crafting a fresh invention utterly unfamiliar to ordinary goblins: a casting net. Green silkworm silk, much like spider silk, is averse to fire but can be thoroughly soaked in water without losing elasticity or dissolving. Upon witnessing Radish Greatstick produce such a substantial quantity of green silkworm silk, Meng-Ching's first thought was to create several nets akin to those he had seen in his childhood, which a single individual could easily wield to cast into rivers for fishing. The vicinity of the Great Stick Camp lacked suitable deep waters for fishing, only 2 shallow streams, barely waist-deep for goblins, meandered nearby. Fishing could be addressed later. The utility of a net extends far beyond mere fishing. If employed judiciously, it becomes a formidable weapon for mass attacks. While demons are agile, if ensnared by a net crafted from green silkworm silk, a few goblins could easily dispatch it before it manages to extricate itself from the net. One could hardly expect a creature of human-like stature to easily escape a composite green silkworm silk net. Meng-Qing harbored great confidence in the gradually forming nets. More than an hour after nightfall, 3 casting nets came to fruition, fully unfurling to span approximately 10 paces in width. Without Meng-Qing's guidance, ordinary goblins would have been utterly incapable of crafting a net with openings merely the size of a fist. They were entirely ignorant of how to tie a live knot. One end of the casting net was secured with vine, while the other was weighted with stones and other materials, allowing the entire assembly to be compact enough for a goblin to wield and cast. With the vine rope, the net's effective range lay between 10 to 20 paces. Beyond that distance, it would be impossible to ensnare, and too close would yield insufficient time to unfurl the net. The distance of 10 to 20 paces is precisely where arrows possess their greatest potency. Meng-Qing attempted to cast the net, and upon witnessing its effectiveness, the participating goblins erupted into ecstatic cries. Even lacking intelligence, they could discern the immense potential of the casting net. With the net enveloping foes, whether in melee or range combat, the outcome lay in the hands of the goblins outside the net, as those ensnared would be left helpless until their demise. Finally completed, should the demons dare to approach again this night, even if they come in double the numbers of the previous night, they would undoubtedly face a crushing defeat. Exhausted from a day of toil, Meng-Qing felt a profound satisfaction with the day's accomplishments. He was grateful that the goblins possessed reasonably dexterous hands. Had they been stone creatures, such intricate tools would have been utterly unattainable. He instructed a few to remain vigilant during the night, while the others hastily sought rest to maintain their alertness. For the demons could very well return. Observing Radish Great Stick, his demeanor invigorated, eyeing the depths of the jungle with eagerness, Meng-Qing felt compelled to remind him. The night still poses significant challenges for goblins. Unlike demons, they are not nocturnal creatures, and wandering away from the camp into the dense forest only to encounter demons would surely spell disaster. If the demons do not make an appearance tonight, shall we press forward tomorrow? Radish Great Stick brimmed with confidence, even contemplating a counter-offensive into the demons' territory. The combat prowess of the Great Stick camp had increased manifold that day, as they had previously been unable to extend their territory outward. With the advent of bows and nets, it is indeed time to endeavor outward. The whereabouts of the monsters are evidently clear. The direction in which they retreated last night offers a clear indication. Even the goblins are aware that by moving in a singular direction, one is bound to encounter the creatures eventually. It is worth considering, though shall be postponed until after tonight. Meng-Qing did not outright reject this proposal, nor did he express immediate approval. That he understood that the Dabang camp could not remain indefinitely confined to the fringes of the jungle, that if they did not seek to expand and engage with humanity, they would inevitably have to venture deeper into the jungle, where the monsters awaited. That, if you believe it feasible, that would be splendid. I have long yearned to deliver a sound thrashing to those monsters. Now to rest. The expression of Dabang was one of exuberance. With Meng-Qing's nod, he felt elated and eagerly anticipated the morrow's arrival. As noon approached, the rhythmic sound of galloping hooves grew increasingly near. In the quaint village of Silver Ginkgo, where not a single horse resided and only a handful of oxen grazed, the villagers could not help but feel a surge of excitement at the sound. They instinctively gathered toward the village entrance, where they soon beheld a trio of riders approaching along the dirt road from the north. That we have arrived. Dismount. Curtis, perched upon a magnificent steed, slowed his horse as he neared the wooden palisade of Silver Ginkgo. When still 50 meters from the entrance, the gallop transformed into a leisurely trot. The knight's keen gaze discerned the villagers' expressions of anticipation mingled with an unmistakable concern as he sat astride his mount. He glanced toward the south, faintly perceiving the boundary of the jungle, a dark line stretching into the distance. With a subtle exertion, Curtis effortlessly dismounted, his presence commanding even greater authority on solid ground than atop his steed. This was due to the formidable Earth-based combat energy he had cultivated, renowned for its unparalleled defensive capabilities and profound connection to the land. Even as a mid-level knight, he was confident that he could withstand a grueling battle against a high-ranking adversary, provided they could surpass his reserves of combat energy. It was clear that riding into the dense jungle was impractical, and Curtis's remarkable abilities on foot gave him the confidence to accept this task. "Ah, Sir Curtis, it is splendid to see you. I feared the Lord might send that unreliable fellow, Hood." "Mind your words," came the admonition. "Ahem, the night has finally arrived. I can almost envision the monsters' heads bursting." The common folk encircling the entrance observed the knight dismounting and conversing hurriedly with the village chief, their hushed discussions punctuating the air. The two knightly retainers stood tall, accepting the villagers' scrutiny with poise. Though clad in mere leather armor and wielding wooden spears, they were nonetheless formidable figures in the eyes of the villagers. These uninitiated knights possessed physical prowess far surpassing that of ordinary militiamen, let alone common folk who had never even held a spear. "Upon seeing you, Sir Curtis, my worries dissipate." The village chief, an elderly man in his 50s, could indeed be referred to as such, though he was only a few years Curtis's senior. The chief's graying hair betrayed his advanced age. Curtis, at 48, appeared no older than 40, his full beard adding a touch of charisma. After all, facial hair is a testament to manhood. "Ah, Selder, my old friend. You still draw breath. Splendid." Curtis was well acquainted with the villages under the dominion of Wild Rose and recognized the chief of Silver Ginkgo, along with many familiar faces, able to name them with ease. This was something Hood could never achieve. Even if he had visited Silver Ginkgo, he would likely remember only the chief's name, forgetting everything else almost immediately. This was precisely why the villagers feared that the Baron would send Hood. After all, a man without a beard is often perceived as unreliable. Alas, how many more years I have left depends on the grace of the divine. Your arrival is fortuitous. I have prepared some humble refreshments. Sir Curtis and his two companions have traveled far. Let us set aside other matters and feast first. He'll hold the position of village chief. Selder was undoubtedly astute. He adeptly observed the weariness on the knights' faces and their gestures of hunger, timely suggesting a meal. Curtis, of course, had no objections. Leading his steed by the reins, he entered Silver Ginkgo village at a leisurely pace, accompanied by his two retainers. "Pray tell, what is the matter?" After enjoying their meal and feeling slightly inebriated, Curtis savored a cup of strong tea to settle his stomach, savoring the flavors. Tasks executed in the village did not entail fear of inferior fare compared to those in Rosetown, where meat was a rarity. His understanding of the task at hand was minimal. He only knew that 3 children were missing, likely linked to the Great River Jungle. As for the reasons behind their disappearance, little was known. It was imperative to clarify the situation before venturing into the jungle. Upon discussing the matter, the chief's smile faded, replaced by a look of dismay. Earlier that morning, the village had dispatched a dozen young men to the jungle's edge. Yet, like the previous night, they had found nothing of value. Not even a scrap of burlap was discovered. Only a few footprints believed to belong to the missing children were found, but they were obscured by fallen branches and leaves, rendering further investigation futile at this juncture. The likelihood of the children still being alive was nearly zero, a truth acknowledged by all 4 present. Yet the issue remained unresolved. The knight's intervention would inevitably necessitate a display of lethal force to eradicate the root of Silver Ginkgo's troubles. The jungle's many peculiarities posed challenges. Recklessly charging within would yield no results, and Curtis lacked the capacity to undertake such a reckless endeavor. After a brief exchange, Curtis nodded an understanding to him. The situation appeared rather straightforward. The disappearance of the 3 children had instilled considerable anxiety among the villagers, who had since kept their offspring closely confined within the settlement. Even during agricultural labor, they could not fully immerse themselves in their tasks, fearing that a monster might stealthily emerge from the forest and approach them from behind. With autumn approaching and the crucial harvest season less than a month away, the proper care of crops became paramount, directly impacting their ability to endure the winter. In previous years, after the harvest, the villagers of Silver Ginkgo would form groups to scour the jungle's edge for edible fruits and seeds to store as provisions for the winter. The urgency of addressing this crisis was precisely why the entire village had pooled together over 30 silver coins. I understand now. Time is of the essence that I shall venture into the great river jungle at once to seek any clues regarding the missing children. The knight's observational skills far surpass those of ordinary individuals. There may yet be evidence overlooked by the villagers. With ample time remaining before nightfall, Curtis was there to fulfill a mission, not for leisure. Failure to complete his task would bring him disgrace upon his return, and no one dared to dissuade Curtis. If a knight such as he hesitated to enter the great river jungle, none would dare to follow. While the jungle was perilous, that danger lay primarily within its depths. The outer regions presented minimal risk of encountering monsters, with wild animals being more common. The two retainers closely followed Curtis, their roles encompassing not only the carrying of replacement weapons and armor, but also assisting the knight in battle when necessary. Both had accompanied Curtis for over 5 years, deeply familiar with his prowess. Amidst the throng of villagers, young and old, who bid farewell, Curtis and his companions exited Silver Ginkgo through the southern gate. Making their way toward the distant edge of the great river jungle, the dark line of the jungle drew near, shading the ground from sunlight. The two knightly retainers exchanged solemn glances. Fully aware that the jungle was not easily traversed, the possibility of never returning was not unfounded. Onward! Curtis's spirited command revitalized the two, restoring their confidence. This moment, Curtis had adjusted his state of mind during their walk. The earlier traces of inebriation had vanished, and his combat energy surged with vitality, ready for immediate deployment. He had truly entered a state of readiness for battle, his formidable presence rendering even the villagers who trailed behind too intimidated to meet his gaze. Such as the knightly lord, how I envy him. If only my son would engage in more training and breathing exercises, but he is so stubborn. How infuriating. Oh, if only I could become a knight as well. Alas, it is but a dream. Let us pray for the safe return of Sir Curtis. 3 individuals ventured into the jungle. In the blink of an eye, they vanished from the gaze of the villagers of Ginkgo Village. This location was determined to be the site where a missing child had been sought multiple times. To their astonishment, it was a spider demon. They had anticipated encountering goblins or other such creatures instead. Indeed, such beings as the spider demon are rarely seen. Night fell. The moonlight bathed the earth once more, luminous yet gentle to the eyes. The moon tonight appeared slightly fuller than it had the previous night. As the night dwellers began to stir, the demons were mobilizing, and the goblins at the great club camp were not idle either. Under Mengqing's command, goblins armed with quivers and bows quickly took their positions. When the demons charged within 20 paces, Mengqing shouted, and 3 nets were cast forth. Appointed as the captain of 10, the Goblin, I intend to make some adjustments to the camp later, which may provoke considerable dissent. For instance, eliminating idlers and conducting regular shooting drills, among other measures. Within the great river jungle, the well-fed goblins did not succumb to sleep immediately. Instead, under the contrasting treatment of whips and large chunks of meat. Their visible vitality, the tree spirit is not the kind that has attained sentience and can walk. That would be a tree demon. The entity referred to as a tree spirit by Curtis is a rare mutated tree. Gather around me. Curtis's call roused his attendants, who hastened to his side upon hearing his voice. Yes, they moved. The demons followed suit. Lost? Curtis was in an exceedingly foul mood, and in a bid to shake off the demons pursuing him. He sought a shortcut toward the edge of the great river jungle. With his spear swung wide, he deflected all arrows aimed at him. True to his reputation as a defensive knight, not a single arrow from the 3 waves of projectiles found its mark. Halt! Once his detection skill confirmed that the target was deceased, Mengqing commanded a stop. In truth, he had no initial intention of slaying this remarkable individual. The first to satiate its hunger was the moonlight demon, which had climbed alone to a towering tree that only it could scale. The remaining demons, even the young ones just weaned, were in a state of starvation. Baron George muttered to himself for a while, glancing at Ivan and recalling that the messenger must be anxiously awaiting a reply, prompting a sigh as he called out, Secretary Ivan, outside the great club camp, gazing at the forest that appeared far more barren than the demon's habitat. Mengqing's resolve only strengthened. Before returning, he led the goblins, If the goblins were captured by the demons, perhaps they would endure humiliation and live as captives day by day, if they could survive. The demons, however, were different. The sound of hooves echoed urgently from afar, growing closer until it finally faded upon reaching the village. The arrival of Sack and Ginkgo village quickly spread throughout the entire settlement. "Do to make way for me." Sack's name held weight with others, but it bore little significance to Lanya for various reasons. Years ago, Sack had, as the sun reached its zenith, the migration of the great club camp commenced. Nearly 100 goblins, laden with their belongings, prepared to leave the territory they had long inhabited. "Lost, are we?" After a few gasps, Lanya's breathing gradually steady, in a realm unseen by ordinary eyes, her expended fighting spirit was slowly restoring. Without much prompting from Mengqing, all the goblins spontaneously began constructing shelters after sufficient rest. This time, Mengqing intervened slightly, ensuring the thatched huts were thoroughly built. At this moment, the great club camp had already quieted down. With the occasional sound of goblin snores, the moonlight demon had never anticipated that Mengqing, an anomaly, would remain awake, intent on observing. Throughout the night, Mengqing engaged in contemplation rather than impulsive actions. Upon arriving in this foreign realm, he discovered that his cognitive abilities had significantly improved compared to his former life as a human. "I wish to live for Lord Morningstar, to attain wisdom akin to that of Lord Morningstar." No. Possessing merely a fraction of Lord Morningstar's wisdom would suffice. Surrounding the colossal tree was a ring of low-growing trees that, of course, low is relative to the giant tree. Those trees, if fruit-bearing, would still be quite tall at over 10 meters. In a backward world, military conquest and cultural assimilation are both remarkably effective methods of subjugation. Mengqing swiftly made a decision. He would temporarily accept the muddy goose feather. All gone, after proceeding approximately 2 kilometers in calmness. He finally glimpsed signs of former intelligent life, yet not a single creature remained. Before dawn broke the following day, the 2 knights and their attendants returned to Rose Town. Once daylight illuminated the sky, the baronial lord's attendants emerged from the castle, dispersing throughout Rose Town. Compared to the gentle power of moonlight, the energy contained within sunlight was overwhelmingly fierce, inflicting injury upon Mengqing in an instant. The Carrot Club was anxious. The clouded leopard, much like the demons, was rarely seen on the ground, preferring to remain aloft in the trees. Its spotted fur adeptly camouflaged it within the autumnal jungle. With the hammer raised high, Mengqing's voice was calm, devoid of any hint of threat. Yet to the ears of the mighty bone hammer, it sent an involuntary shiver down his spine. The first to quiet down were the original members of the great club camp. The goblins from the bone hammer camp remained chaotic and disorganized, until they noticed that everyone was watching this. "The item is good, but I have no need for it," just as the mighty bone hammer turned away in disappointment. He heard Mengqing's voice, prompting the powerful. Before the sun god's chariot could rise above the horizon, in a spacious chamber ample enough for 1,000 soldiers to line up, the flower queen opened her eyes. Such caution was not without reason. Long ago, nations displayed a lax attitude towards memorials, and the materials for memorials were diverse, often directly presented to the sovereign. "Is it truly goblins?" The voice of the tulip queen rose significantly. The emergence of such wooden arrows held great value. Yet her primary concern remained the camellia. Although dwarves may be shorter than humans, their physical strength far surpasses that of humans. The mandrake flower, which could even captivate human knights, thrived with multiple blooms each day. In truth, constructing roads would also be quite beneficial. However, considering the rapid changes in the jungle environment, Mengqing decided against this laborious endeavor that could not sustain itself in the long run. "I have never described the appearance of the outside world to you. I had originally intended to wait until you came of age before revealing it, but it seems I have been overly presumptuous." After the head count concluded, the group dispersed, yet they did not truly scatter. Instead, they engaged in the breakfast ritual that would leave ordinary goblins envious. The sound of calls echoed across the expansive training ground, resonant and loud, striking fear into the hearts of the faint-hearted, extinguishing their fighting spirit. Within the training grounds, 2 lines. As dusk fell, the laboring inhabitants of Wild Rose territory concluded their day's work, that a middle-aged man paused outside the bakery, hesitated for a moment, and then pushed the door open, retrieving. It would not be impossible to have Ed treat us. Simply telling him a story would suffice. The astute mountain dwarf stroked his thick beard and chuckled. Exhaling deeply, the mountain dwarf furrowed his brow tightly. His understanding of goblins was limited, yet he knew that entering the realm of the dwarves was, behold, before us lies a stretch of flat, fertile land. Though it is now overgrown with wild grasses, it may one day be filled with fruit trees, lush vegetables, and, in a long-standing ginkgo village, the able-bodied men and women in their prime numbered scarcely half, and warriors were even fewer. Not every villager would choose to become a militia member. How peculiar. Why do these goblins appear somewhat different? In the realm of imagined assaults by Mengqing, the villagers of Yinxing village were facing a tangible threat. The sun chariot gradually shifted westward, while a brazen cohort of goblins had lingered for nearly an hour without taking action, forcing the villagers to seek refuge within the confines of their settlement. Easily vanquished, Mengqing observed coolly from 300 meters away, his gaze unperturbed by the movements of the humans. Behind him, the goblins' hearts raced with anticipation. Victory approached faster than anticipated, leaving behind their wailing and pleading comrades as the panicked villagers surged forth. Dragging along those who had yet to enter the fray, as dusk descended, the urgent clatter of hooves echoed along the seldom-trodden dirt path that a group of 6, their expressions grave, approached, with the last in line being the young knight. The anticipated sounds of battle had not reached their ears, and the knights, now perilously close to the northern gate of Yinxing village, exchanged bewildered glances. "Where are the arrows? Any discoveries?" Inquisitively, Lanya pressed on, as a militiaman scratched his head and muttered to his companions about a large stack found by the wall. Sack, withdrawing his gaze from Lanya, observed the jesting knights around him, feeling somewhat exasperated. Knights, too, are human and possess a penchant for gossip. If it were Lord Sack, whatever you say goes, Hewed, of whom you have undoubtedly heard tales, was also present at the southern gate of the village. Not only was young Sayer there, but a multitude of villagers as well. Unlike the previous occasion when the entire village had bid farewell, this time few dared to approach, having encountered numerous traps. Some knights had even been ensnared by lassos around their calves, abruptly flung upwards to collide with tree branches. Here they come again. Upon hearing the faint rustling, the 5 knights fixed their gazes ahead, catching sight of a flash of green weaving through the trees at the edge of their vision. Are we to retreat? Do they think the forest is a marketplace, coming and going as they please? Squads 4, 5, and 6, engage. Drive them into the poison. The lethality of the venomous hornets far surpassed the imaginations of the goblins and human knights present. Goblins, risking their lives beneath the hornet's nest, ignited a fire, but 1, 2, 3 knights succumbed to the stings of the hornets. Confirmed, the human knights dragged from the forest by the goblins had met their demise. They're back. They're back. Lord Morningstar has returned. Though Mengqing and his band of goblins were still far from their camp, the sentinels dispatched to scout ahead had spotted something in the woods. As night fell, human knight Sack found himself tossing and turning. Unable to find solace in sleep, he had fled through the jungle like a headless chicken for quite some time. Under Mengqing's scrutiny, the female knight had transformed into a potent energy magnet, drawing forth water-based energies, despite her struggle to meditate. A makeshift hearth, constructed from stones, soon blazed within the wooden shack that held the captives, a location forbidding ordinary goblins from approaching, guarded instead by goblin warriors. Impossible! The female knight incredulously countered Aitsao's words, astonished that goblins and elves, 2 races so distantly related, could. The sound of jingling bells echoed upon the uneven dirt road. 4 magnificent steeds, their coats gleaming, pulled a carriage as the secretary of Thorny Ridge hurriedly exited the castle, flanked by knightly retainers and soldiers from the baron's castle, disseminating this news along the street. Come, drink heartily. The contents of the cup were among the Earl of Camellia's favored indulgences, while some nobles reveled in wine. Others despised it vehemently, reflecting the diverse tastes within their ranks. After a lengthy pause, the figure curled in the corner finally lifted her head, long hair obscuring her visage, rendering her features inscrutable. Indecipherable words escaped her half-elf lips. Humans, your free time is over. Midday. The tightly shut wooden door was pushed open from the outside. The goblin's cacophonous calls rang out. Mengqing had grown taller, now approximately the height of a 15-year-old human. Around 5 feet, resembling a sturdy carrot, in stark contrast to his previous stature of 3 feet. The female knight clenched and unclenched her fists several times, the perplexing sensation weighing heavily upon her. Considering her status as a captive, she stifled her discontent and continued, "That I in the jungle. It seems you are powerless against me." Gathering a slight amount of energy, Mengqing crafted 2 chairs from branches. Eston broke. Their conversation remained unbroken. From initial restraint to unrestrained expression, the liberated female knight often spoke startlingly. She felt the flames of revenge. In the early hours of the morning, the female knight abruptly awoke from a nightmarish slumber. She had experienced a truly dreadful dream, and upon awakening, she realized that the nightmarish sensations from her dream. Perceiving a shift in her line of sight, Lanya turned and instinctively held her breath. In her view, the once chaotic mass of figures began to coalesce. At the Dwarven Ed's Tavern, the iron door swung open, revealing 2 hooded figures clad in simple garments, armed with bows, resembling returning rangers from a long journey. Within the Baron's castle, the atmosphere was suffocatingly silent. The Earl of Camellia, seated at the head of the table, had remained silent for an extended period. His silence prompted others to refrain from speaking first. "We aren't returning today. We intend to find a place to camp for the night." Once again, they chose to spend the night outside the camp, a trial run, for eventually, we must venture forth. The sound of rushing water reverberated as the little goblin Aitzao diligently scrubbed Lanya's back while she lay in the wooden tub. When she turned to face him, she gazed upon Lanya's imposing figure. Capturing her alive was a challenging endeavor. Yet I believe that once we locate her lair, she shall have no escape. Sir Light furrowed his brow, but soon relaxed. Returning home after work, it was nearly 8 o'clock. Having skipped lunch, the snow had fallen all day at Liuxing, and the outside world was frigid, mirroring Liuxing's current mood. It appears they truly intend to venture into the jungle to hunt those goblins. What shall we do? Should we wait outside for them to emerge, or follow behind in search of an opportunity? Shall we still take a break? Once again, using serpentine branches, Mengqing suspended the female knight upside down. Playfully toying with a twig, his tone calm. Lord Morningstar, as the herbal ointment was applied to her wounds, Aitsao's hesitation vanished, as she earnestly called out to Mengqing. Having not seen Lanya exit the wooden shack, Mengqing felt a measure of relief. Gathering the clothing he had prepared for the female knight and stuffing it into the cabin, he stood outside the door, attentive. Set up camp. Regroup. The Earl of Camellia, issuing commands, finally articulated this arrangement, prompting a collective sigh of relief from all, including the knights. Noble. Due to his agreement with the female knight, Mengqing refrained from taking the goblins deeper into the jungle the following day. "What? We are being tracked." Upon hearing Mengqing's explanation, several sentinels felt utterly ashamed, nearly leaping from their perches in the trees. Utterly. Mengqing raised his head, his voice trembling slightly. He was now the embodiment of faith throughout the camp. The consequences of retreating without battle were starkly evident, and that was has the wound not healed. The goblins had preemptively detected the humans' movements and prepared accordingly, while the humans remained blissfully ignorant, still floundering in confusion. In this direction, prepare to set traps, primarily using lassos. Remember, this is not a hunting expedition. We seek the dead, not the living. Make sure to obliterate them. Retreat, with a strong black bamboo bough strapped to his back. Mengqing drew out his claw hook, while the other goblins also obeyed the order to refrain from retracting their bows. Mere moments later, what audacity! After nightfall, 2 half-elves were engaged in a discussion about the brazen actions of the goblins. Mengqing's boldness, Night Light, led the pursuit. Accompanied by 2 novice high-ranking wind knights, he instructed you to remain still and calm, assuring you he would return shortly. Why, Lord Morningstar, think twice. This is far too perilous. Aware of Mengqing's forthcoming plans, the Goblin 10 captain, who was supposed to execute harassment tactics, wore a grim expression. "Humans, your reckless destruction of the jungle will bring you retribution. The voice from earlier echoed once more, causing night light to halt his observations of the surroundings. Were those thoughts all your own? The concept of embodying energy, is it truly possible to exist without a physical form? Meng Qing observed the human encampment for a while before returning to the area where the main force was stationed. As the humans began their return journey, he discreetly trailed behind them. "My kin, please remain calm," a familiar voice from outside momentarily stunned the half-elf maiden, as she had heard it throughout the years. "I come to inform you that your surname is Jasmine, in the Kingdom of Flowers. Noble surnames are derived from the names of blossoms. I have already discerned your true identity. This moment. I cannot. Very well, I shall speak plainly. Regardless of what transpired, I, Ed, merely sell wine and have had no involvement in any incidents that I swear by the Titan God, Ed. I am utterly satisfied, truly, immensely satisfied." The mighty bone hammer was so moved that it nearly bowed to Meng Qing. From his name, one could surmise that the goblins, the so-called potion, is a blend of various common materials containing trace energy, combined with a principal ingredient rich in a specific energy, subjected to a complex process of boiling and extraction using water and fire. The distant sound from outside the encampment roused Meng Qing's spirits, prompting him to call for Edith. The two departed the wooden cabin at the edge of the camp, traversing through the walls guarded by goblins. However, the goblins' good mood did not last long. After the afternoon respite, two robust goblin 10 captains, each leading 10 subordinates, ventured into the villagers of Ginkgo village were tense, unaware that the knights they had sent were even more anxious. Having personally traversed the jungle and endured a failed expedition, along with the previous losses suffered by many, the secretary had learned of Ginkgo village being extorted by goblins yesterday afternoon, which had enraged the Baron. Little did he expect, today the goblins would employ the same old tactics to extort yet another. As darkness fell, the goblins retreated. The villagers, who had been on edge all day, finally relaxed but were pained by the losses. For the goblins had taken away what they had toiled to harvest. Having already bullied the common folk, Meng Qing found it hard to unleash further malice, with grievances having their rightful owners. Meng Qing came this time bearing a substantial package for Edith. A silent yet mesmerizing display of magic left even Meng Qing astonished, let alone the unsophisticated villagers within the Baron's castle. A similar atmosphere prevailed. It wasn't until a knock echoed against the window that even became alert. Rising from his seat, he approached the window, inquiring before opening it. Good heavens! In such a conspicuous location as the study. It was not long before a servant passed by. Upon discovering the lifeless body of secretary even at the study's entrance, chaos soon enveloped the entire baronial estate. Morningstar, shall we not depart? As night deepened, Meng Qing and his companions had yet to leave Rose Town, prompting Edith's concern. They were currently hiding within the confines of Rose. What are the prices, if they are similar to the market? Then it suffices. If they are too low, we cannot dare to purchase potions of dubious origin. Raymond, having gathered niter, provided Meng Qing with a hefty load, while no one quibbled over the excess. Watching Meng Qing, cloaked in dark robes, depart, the autumn winds howled, and soon after the harvest, the days began to turn progressively cooler. Following 2 autumn rains, the mornings and evenings bore the chill of winter's approach. I heard you are to lead an expedition tomorrow. During dinner, the female knight Lanya, having acquired the information from an unknown source, sought out Meng Qing. Roar, brother, are you going or not? If not, I shall take his place. I shall tear him to shreds. On the other end, a giant wolf could no longer contain itself, fixating its gaze on Meng Qing. Eager to pounce, night fell. The goblins set camp in a spacious meadow alongside 3 giant wolves. The 3 wolves finally enjoyed an abundance of food, feasting to their heart's content. Now, everyone stand in line. Since you have accepted my invitation, be prepared to serve me. There was no need for you to, as the wintering camp commenced, the members could not remain entirely idle. With no need for hunting or gathering, engaging in a series of constructions became the best way to pass the time. This time, Meng Qing did not take the entire fighting force from the camp. Leaving behind roughly half of the soldiers, he had made arrangements before departing, circumventing the wetlands inhabited by numerous lizard men, The goblins pressed onward, subsequently encountering others dwelling within the jungle, collectively referred to by humans as. With detection abilities and stargazing eyes, even from across the river, Meng-Qing could discern the scenes within the murky waters. The stretch of river he observed was such a revelation opened his eyes wide. However, the fishmen regarded the intruding goblins with disdain. Yet upon engagement, the fishmen fell to arrows, as Grey Star severed the throat of the wild dog leader. Meng-Qing turned his gaze towards other directions. Once the goblins entered the fray, the battle was already beyond discussion. Morningstar, have you found new kin? The large carrot stick exchanged pleasantries with Meng-Qing, casting his eyes upon the soldiers who accompanied Meng-Qing. Among whom, a kin once told me a saying that I still hold dear to my heart, never daring to forget. That saying was, "Goblin shall never be enslaved." After Meng-Qing concluded his words, a profound silence enveloped the council hall. Regardless of whether they had previously concurred or opposed, the goblins gazed at Meng-Qing with admiration. The bounty issued by the Queen of the Tulip Hall spread like wildfire after the conclusion of the council meeting. The Queen placed no restrictions on who could fulfill the bounty, regardless of the silvery armor, paired with thick fur, fitted upon the giant wolves, did not appear cumbersome. Rather, it accentuated their ferocity and enhanced their protective capabilities. 6 giant. At a forsaken wooden cabin, whose origin was unknown, Meng-Qing and his entourage dismounted from the wolves to rest. The cabin appeared to have been constructed with having traveled from afar. What sort of entry permit is required? Lanya removed her hood, revealing a countenance both charming and vexing. The 4 soldiers' eyes. Let us go. After we have eaten our fill, we shall seek out a suitable forge to craft the tools I desire. Since we have found it here, we can frequent this place. Allow me to describe it this way: I owe you 10 silver coins. I have traveled far and wide, gathering enough to repay you. You took the money and purchased. The bustling atmosphere of Iron Mountain territory is unmatched by other baronial lands. Just the frequency of knights traversing the streets speaks volumes. After visiting a few streets. Indeed, I am still alive. I ask that all you have to say. If so, I shall take my leave. Initially intending to deny, Lanya remained silent for a long while before responding to the embrace behind her. Clutching a recently acquired iron rod, Meng-Qing showed no hesitation. With the wood energy shielding him, he charged forward with unyielding determination. Over the walls, the southern gate is excessively high and thick. However, alternative methods do exist. Meng-Qing is quite confident in the leaping ability of the giant wolf, which exceeds 2 meters. Scatter the beans to form an army. Even with secret weapons at his disposal, Meng-Qing is assured of his ability to exchange a few blows with Taishan before resorting to them. The knight's strength, alas, Ai Chao and the others have yet to arrive. After running quite a distance, Meng-Qing suddenly commanded the giant wolf to halt. Lanya and EDC exchanged awkward glances contemplating Meng-Qing's extraordinary appearance. Taishan could only feel a pang of toothache. The other party must undoubtedly be of mixed blood, perhaps a half-elf and goblin combination, a most astonishing hybrid an old dog who has been single for over 50 years. Understand nothing. Do not presume. I am unaware of how many times you have secretly watched Lien air bathe and change clothes. The green-skinned man erupted in fury. The conversation turning abruptly. Raymond's tone was one of resignation. His plans for a bountiful income had fallen through. Although the current ratio is high, it is not excessively absurd. The resources he can mobilize. The pulley system is Meng-Qing's method for enabling the giant wolf to pull the heavy cart. Those familiar with physics understand that a movable pulley combined with a fixed pulley forms a pulley system, allowing for a lesser force to be exerted. There's the scent of fruit wafting through the air. Not having ventured far, a minotaur suddenly began sniffing vigorously, its acute sense detecting the aroma. Meng-Qing kept his word, never once harboring regrets over the minotaur's remarkable nature. Only obedient captives are good captives. Those who do not comply, while Meng-Qing exerted considerable effort to capture the minotaur to bolster the spring plowing. In the human world beyond the jungle, the spring sowing was in full swing. This time, as Meng-Qing departed home, he planned to address several issues revealed by the population surge in the joint encampment, such as the shortage of iron tools and salt, particularly castanet. As the two sides drew near, The voice of the goblin centurion rang out. The shielding shields dispersed. Overwhelming the scene, the objective of this expedition is the iron mine located in the northeastern direction of Taishan territory. Thus, Meng Qing did not lead the team directly to Taishan, but instead instructed them to move diagonally toward the northeast from a considerable distance, as the Lord, Taishan is obligated to supply provisions and other consumables for the knights he has hired, along with the necessary supplies for their campaign. Once everything was prepared, time had already assembled everyone. After successfully raiding the iron mine and accomplishing their objectives, Meng Qing wasted no time and gathered the goblins. Heading directly toward the previously circumvented path, some had already deduced the origins of Meng Qing and his company from the appearance of the giant wolf. It is worth noting that the events that had transpired in Taishan territory had long since reached the mining village. After some contemplation, Taishan arrived at a conjecture, one that was undoubtedly close to the truth. Gazing at the knights, whose fatigue was difficult to conceal, Taishan hesitated. Should he divide his forces? If possible. He deeply desired to traverse the world as a neutral bard, savoring delicacies and witnessing breathtaking sights. Just as described in books, the footprints knights mounted on war horses moved swiftly, initiating a search pattern from a wooden cart as their base and advancing in arcs. However, no matter how diligently they searched, that multitude with the presence of the starry-eyed, Meng Qing and the goblins encountered no obstacles. They even dispatched several knights and soldiers who were still lost in slumber on the spot. When the guards reacted, "Look, this is a patch of sticky soil. Iron or bears a resemblance to soil. It may appear solid, yet can also become remarkably pliable. On a scorching day, a large block of ice made from saltpeter placed in a basin of water brings sheer delight just by proximity." With ample saltpeter reserves, the goblin camp, after distancing themselves from human settlements, logistical support became a significant challenge, compounded by the various magical creatures and beasts that inhabit the jungle. The summer jungle is fraught with peril. Change the personnel. Upon confirming that this rudimentary engine could generate more kinetic energy than the Minotaur's strength, Meng Qing halted the engine, indicating that it would delve into more advanced chemistry, encompassing the fusion and alteration of the chemical properties of materials. In essence, it resembles the legendary O. Then what do you think can be done to change this situation? Meng Qing became intrigued. Was it already time to introduce currency? Clay is easily obtainable. Even children can dig it up for play. After the meeting established the decision to create currency, the afternoon found the forge. Rest assured, I have promptly evaluated the value of the existing supplies in the camp by type and quality overnight. Here is the detailed list, which has undergone my thorough consideration and deliberation. I shall strive to enhance everyone's welfare, ensuring that all enjoy ample provisions and wealth. Only through contribution can one expect returns. To seek gains without effort is folly. While some found respite, others inevitably became burdened. The newly established Ceramic Currency Management Department was founded based on the logistics warehouse. Many goblins received ceramic coins as various beings continued to flood into the northern grasslands of the Great River. The hunting teams found their endeavors increasingly arduous. Following the emergence of anomalies, I recall that when we were in the royal capital, the sun was to the south at noon, to the west in the evening. And astonishingly, just after sunset, it had already moved to the northwest. Ultimately, no one proved capable of fulfilling the highly skilled profession of blacksmith among the Minotaurs. Yet Meng Qing unearthed their strength and physical advantages, enabling some may not yet know, but our mining village previously endured an assault from magical creatures, taking considerable time to clear the collapsed mine tunnels and resume operations. The mine lacks sufficient. What kinds of pelts and bones do you have? And in what quantities? Taishan territory lies at the southern border of the kingdom, where few engage in the fur trade. Yet, could it genuinely be goblins? Raymond stood up in astonishment. The implications of half-elves and goblins are entirely different. If Meng Qing were Raymond's words completely clarified the thoughts of his adopted son, and the subordinates voiced no dissent. The longer one experiences life, the more one comprehends the harsh realities of this world. Nothing as the group continued onward, forging a wide path through the densely tangled jungle. Every few meters, the last night would what has occurred. Lei Ming pushed past others to reach Ron, gazing with concern at Ron, who was clutching his head in agony. Uncertain, have you made any discoveries? Lei Ming directed his gaze toward the boulder while inquiring of his companions nearby. From this distance, the boulder appeared the eldest knight in the group had a sudden inspiration. He was not merely fantasizing. He had indeed read descriptions of such phenomena in some records, suggesting that this world is not solely while Raymond leisurely conducted business in the human world. The goblin encampment in the jungle faced increasingly daunting challenges. They had successively gathered several observing the dog-headed men, forming a defensive posture ahead. Meng Qing not only felt no concern, but instead chuckled. The other goblin wolf riders also, the fruits of the palm trees are merely flat and devoid of nutrition. At this juncture, Lei Ming no longer considered the fact that his adversary was an injured individual. Despite the horrifying act of the latter consuming his own hand in the face of the rudimentary education provided in the goblin schools or literacy classes, the instruction was considerably limited. IT was essential for goblins to comprehend the distinctions between the jungle and the outside world, particularly concerning humans. The third census of the joint camp was underway, inscribed a universally recognized script of the human realm, meticulously penned with a fountain pen. Unlike his own, in contemporary times, goblins no longer fretted over their sustenance. Various agricultural implements were crafted successively, expanding the cultivated area repeatedly. Merely, the concept of spatial folding was revealed in this manner. After persistently questioning the rationale behind establishing a printing press to produce 50,000 books, Meng Qing, the clay was pliable before firing, making it exceedingly easy to engrave characters upon it while preparing additional identical inscriptions. Even if some were to be ruined during the firing process, it would be of no consequence. Morningstar No. The first to voice dissent was the elderly Radish Club. He had already been a goblin when Meng Qing traversed into this realm. Sooner or later, I shall truly depart from the jungle and venture forth. This time, my absence will not exceed a few years before I return, for I have faith in everyone's capabilities. After my departure, the camp, Lanya's affection for mounts had never wavered. Many of the war horses acquired by Meng Qing were bred by her. Thus, Lanya also possessed her own war steed. The rhythmic clatter of hooves echoed along the road outside the eastern gate of Rosetown. Observing this scene from afar, the soldiers at the eastern gate of Rosetown rallied themselves with renewed vigor. The house still stands. Upon glimpsing Curtis's former residence, Lanya was unable to suppress her joy. This vicinity was exceedingly familiar to her. Yet, it is I, Sister Mary. Upon seeing an old acquaintance, Lanya's face radiated excitement. She hastily approached Mary, extending her hand to grasp. It is truly pitiable and sorrowful to witness a former knight's lady now reduced to tilling the land for survival. Noticing the farming tools within the thatched shed. My Lord Baron, it is right here. Indeed, who would have thought that this individual had long since become a wanted criminal in the kingdom? I was wondering why he appeared so. Meng Qing's counterattack stirred unrest among the opposing side, as they assumed defensive postures, intensifying their aura of protection. Yet, gazing upon the arrow embedded in a fallen comrade's forehead, they remained filled with trepidation. Faced with the advancing Otto, Meng Qing maintained his composure, casually scattering a multitude of tree demon cores. Those wooden fragments, suspended in mid-air, were. The residents of Rosetown discovered a grand commotion within their territory today, as the Baron mobilized knights and soldiers. They called out, gradually converging towards Mary's mother. My Lord Baron, what troubles you? The guards of the Baron's castle gazed in astonishment at the disheveled and panting Baron George, who approached the castle in a hurried manner. May I withdraw? I choose neutrality. I shall depart immediately. The knight who had persistently opted for neutrality, realizing that he could no longer remain a mere observer, weighed his options and decided. He certainly ran rather swiftly. The three knights, sensing the impending danger, seized the opportunity to flee while Otto and his knights engaged the Baron, as the others prepared to draw, passing through the main castle corridor and traversing a garden in full bloom. Meng Qing and his companion arrived at the castle's rear courtyard, the residence of the Baron and his family. I choose to press on. Otto harbored a deep-seated animosity towards Baron George, vowing not to relent until he entered the treasury. Even with Meng Qing at his side, he could not, Lanya, gather everything. I shall share 20% with you upon our return. Mengqing had no reservations about acquiring more coins, valuing their high worth and portability. As he had further plans, the outer courtyard was even more bustling than when Mengqing arrived, with audacious townsfolk entering the Baroness castle, either tormenting defenseless maidservants or transporting. In the chronicles, goblins are described as the seventh race created by the divine, existing in nearly the same vein as humans and dwarves. The preface of the Goblin Chronicles states, in the year 2020, the year of the metal rat. The pandemic that erupted at the beginning of this year resonated deeply within the hearts of every child of China, united in breath and fate. As for her fondness for women, Dana naturally refrained from mentioning it to anyone outside of Dorothea. Even though many speculated about her orientation, it was merely, in truth, I'm more intrigued to meet the author capable of penning the Goblin Chronicles. Perched upon her warhorse, Dana, occasionally. This place is quite lively. It feels hardly inferior to the previous Count's territory, relying on the repeatedly effective forged knight certificates. Mengqing and Lanya do not wish to die. Then leave at once. The individual leading the foreign knights uttered this statement in a somewhat stilted, flowery language. This provoked the surrounding. Prince No, a member of the foreign knights, stepped forward, whispering into the ear of the leading knight. He believed that speaking in his native tongue would. This infuriates me. Upon returning to the inn, reflecting on the day's experiences, the knights from the kingdom of Hassa were all exceedingly irate. Prince Kos was even. As night fell, the Yellow Rose territory was ablaze with lights. Tomorrow marks the day when the Lord will select a suitor. Thus, many shops extended their closing hours. The eldest daughter possesses a frigid demeanor, so cold that even while conversing with the Viscount, she rarely displays any expression. Such an iceberg is not easily swayed. It is best not to. You speak, I shall listen. The seasoned Steve remained relatively unperturbed. Having lived for so long, he understood well that if a pie were to fall from the sky, once all arrangements were settled. Kos donned his most splendid attire, laced his leather boots, and adjusted the hat adorned with magnificent eagle feathers. He unsheathed the curved dagger embedded with. It appeared that everyone's enthusiasm had indeed been ignited by this esteemed Viscount of the Yellow Rose. In the square, Mengqing listened to the surrounding cheers, and for a moment it felt as if, although I do not wish to dampen your spirits, from what I observe, Colin has yet to appear. Sitala's expression towards her younger sister was quite complex. She found it difficult to know. Kos was well versed in the art of killing, having mastered combat techniques solely designed for that purpose. The world amidst the yellow sands is scant in resources. Even a single bowl of water could sustain. For half an hour, no knights stepped forward to register, as many began to grow somewhat impatient. The Viscount of the Yellow Rose finally ceased to wait, a warhorse of strength comparable to that of a mid-tier knight, or rather a hybrid warhorse, is truly astonishing. The detection abilities were consistently at play. Contestant number 1 has failed, and the failure was undoubtedly quite tragic. The injuries inflicted by the blue sky would require at least a week to heal. Curse it, as it approached the turn of Prince Kos. His expression was far from pleasant. 2 of his 7 attendants had already met with the knights who passed the assessment, largely exhaled in relief, though this stage tested luck rather than strength. Aside from a few, the others, vendors filled the streets, with rumors that betting had commenced on who could succeed in this second trial set by the Viscount of the Yellow Rose that we observed. Before 10 o'clock in the morning, including Mengqing and Lanya, the knights who had passed yesterday's first trial had already gathered in the contestant waiting area at the square. It is indeed correct not to finalize answers until the last minute. With a fluidity akin to flowing water, they completed questions of varying lengths at a pace of mere seconds per item. During the summer season, Lanya donned nothing more than casual attire, even when reclined. It is exceedingly evident, and as for the exquisite contours of her figure, there is no need to elaborate further. Consider it once more. In a moment of vulnerability, Mengqing exhibited an expression of earnest pleading before Lanya, causing her heart to flutter. It was a rare encounter for her. The urgent knocking at the door resounded once again, inopportune, compelling Mengqing to reluctantly cease his efforts. He was not yet prepared to engage in intimate acts under the scrutiny of onlookers. The Viscount of Yellow Rose unveiled the final test content, prompting many to display expressions of knowing anticipation, realizing that after much circling, the conclusion was at hand. The triplet sisters sighed in unison, exchanging glances that revealed the shared anguish etched upon their faces. They had always perceived the situation as extraordinary. If you do not contribute your efforts, then we shall ensure your demise first. Aside from Lanya, the mid-level knight within the group completed his task that I withdraw everyone as astonishment. In a moment of unexpected decisiveness, Lanya deftly maneuvered her steed and exited the arena, despite possessing ample stamina. Kos, having already stepped down from the platform, remained intently focused on Mengqing, aware that even if he could not confront Mengqing in the arena, their paths would inevitably cross outside of it, following his initial arrow. Mengqing swiftly loosed several more, but these were not aimed at the opposing knight. Rather, they targeted the 4 cardinal directions surrounding the knight, each arrow landing precisely where intended, as the arena was left with only Mengqing and the 5 knights. The captivated audience fixated their gaze upon the 5 knights. Eager to witness the perilous plight they faced, Steve would naturally refrain from engaging in such menial tasks, delegating them to his subordinates. He had already reaped the benefits of his labors once the results were revealed. As he traversed the path lined with yellow roses, the Viscount's attention remained steadfastly upon Mengqing. He scrutinized him, having previously not taken note of his presence. When the Viscount of Yellow Rose introduced both parties, the triplet sisters adorned their faces with ceremonial smiles, clearly lacking genuine warmth in their welcome of Mengqing. Mengqing's distinctive response piqued the interest of Mylan and the triplet sisters, prompting even Kos and the other 2 knights to pose inquiries regarding Mengqing's remarks. How do you define commoners and nobility? Mengqing countered with a question of his own. Commoners, of course, are those who have not governed land within 3 generations, striving merely for survival. Father, it is dire that Lu Renjia has challenged Kos to a duel, and they're about to engage in the backyard. Nancy was dispatched by her 2 sisters to inform the Viscount of Yellow Rose. Regardless of the morality of his actions, Mengqing had never concerned himself with the opinions of others, much like when he first arrived in this world and executed a nocturnal raid on the demon camp. Upon his awakening, Mengqing had been endowed with enhanced physical capabilities, notably in agility, followed closely by strength. His might was not to be underestimated. Everyone, brace yourself, he admonished the knights, accompanying him in a grave tone, eliciting nods of understanding as they ceased their discussions. He can see me. I must withdraw. Losing is preferable to an uncertain demise. Better to suffer embarrassment than... I previously mentioned that this pamphlet had long been circulating across various territories, and it turns out it was disseminated by those unseen rats. Flipping the paper over, Mylan discovered that the reverse side was not blank, but rather adorned with intricate and variable lines containing. Under the protection of a mid-level knight, Mylan's figure came into Steve's view. A mere 100 meters behind Mylan lay the entrance to the underground passage. I offer you my triplet sisters, my maternal kin, as a token of my sincerity. Would this suffice? Mylan stated with an impassive demeanor, surprising the knights who followed him that I wonder how chaotic the Yellow Rose territory has become. After a full day and night of travel, Mengqing and Lanya had yet to encounter a dignified noble. Crack! The sound of a porcelain bowl shattering upon the ground seemed to signify a certain message. Located in the western part of the Flower Kingdom, Diana harbored a deep-seated dissatisfaction with the feudal system established by the first king, which had decentralized power to local nobles. Within a mere 3 centuries, the kingdom's lower strata, upon reviewing the detailed report presented before her, Queen Diana maintained a serene expression. The information aligned closely with her expectations of the Lily Countess domain, with only slight variations concerning the heir. Though approaching 60 years of age, Dale Guy, the Count of Lily, appeared as vigorous as a man in his 40s when he presented himself publicly. Preposterous. It was only then that Count Dale became aware of Leakin's prior offenses against Diana. His gaze directed at Leakin's filled with disappointment. After a considerable time, the Count of Lily finally summoned the strength to rise from the ground, instinctively rushing to pursue the already departed Diana and her entourage. That night, in a knightly domain named Mingyun, the Lord Mingyun hosted Mengqing, Lanya, and 2 other wandering knights who had journeyed to this place. Hereditary titles represent a significant reason for the nobility's encroachment upon the kingdom's interests, as they pass down not only land but also the means to exploit the kingdom. Please wait a moment. Noticing Mengqing hastily departing with Lanya, Diana could no longer contain her curiosity and called out to him. "Who are you, truly?" The smile on Queen Diana's face vanished, while Derosi had already placed a hand on the hilt of her short sword. In the gathering, among those present, Lanya held the most authority to speak on Mengqing's words, having witnessed the evolving attitudes of those who ventured into the jungle firsthand. Those individuals, thank you, Your Majesty, that I shall not forget today's experience, and I vow to repay it in kind in the future. Mind your own affairs, should I encounter you again. The capital of the Flower Kingdom is known as Tulip City, the earliest established city within the kingdom to this day. The city remains under expansion. Inhabited by, the guest speaks wisely. It is evident they possess extraordinary experiences from their travels. The capital differs from the territories of local nobles. Here, one has the opportunity to meet many esteemed lords. Having been caught in the rain during the day, it is ill-suited for an all-nighter. Let us all retire early, as the morning sun once again bathed the earth in light. Tulip City, which had lain quiet throughout the night, buzzed back to life with shops along the streets opening their doors for business and early risers. "Gentlemen, I have no desire to compete. Please select another." Mengqing endeavored to speak with a tone of negotiation to the leader among them, as his detection abilities provided feedback. Without an invitation, even high-ranking knights could not enter the royal palace. It is essential to understand that as the capital of the Flower Kingdom, Tulip City— Wait, what is that? A fleeting glance caught Mengqing's eye, whereupon he hastily redirected his gaze to the distance. Having departed from the ruins long obscured by history and dust, Mengqing reinvigorated himself, searching within the vast palace for elements that might induce a mutation in his bloodline. Standing before a transparent and colossal glass shield, Mengqing's gaze fell upon the heart of magic within, pulsating in perfect synchrony with his own heartbeat, plunging him into contemplation with the heart of magic. The most significant discovery of this journey, Mengqing exited the long-abandoned treasury, utilizing his starlight eyes to survey the outside, where he indeed found, "I demand that you kneel before me and beg for mercy. And I shall do this in front of your woman." Austin laughed maniacally. Having been embroiled in a clash with Meng just days prior, the combatants entered a fierce contest from the outset, with the very aftermath of their battle eliciting gasps of astonishment from onlookers. The steel in the hands of the high-ranking knights. Have the two of you forgotten the restrictions imposed within the royal city? High-ranking knights are forbidden from flying or engaging in combat within the confines of the capital. Thus, ceased this madness. Time flowed on, and the blood pooling beneath Austin, the result of a lance piercing his thigh, had amassed into a significant puddle, accompanied by the debilitating effects of blood loss. Upon hastily returning to his residence, Duke Caesar encountered Austin, who had succumbed to a deep slumber from excessive bleeding. Even now, his complexion remained ghastly pale. It was indeed Mengqing's idea to lay in wait for Duke Caesar and his entourage upon their return. The grand procession of Duke Caesar had long since traversed the streets he had previously commanded. "My lord, permit me a moment's discourse. Austin's actions do not reflect my true intentions. That I am prepared to offer a vast expanse of fertile land, a populace of 10,000, and a treasure of 100,000 gold coins as a token of my goodwill." What manner of beast is this? The knights, who had initially underestimated the modestly sized demon lizard, soon found themselves in dire straits. The creature, cloaked in a hue of deep purple and black, had nearly consumed half of the ordinary residents within the Duke's mansion. Having grown to a height of 1 meter and a length exceeding 5 meters while on all fours, the Duke's residence, typically inaccessible without an invitation, was now entered, even under the cover of night. The opulence within the mansion left the royal knights in sheer awe. "Who spoke?" "Step forth," Sir John declared, glancing back as soon as the words escaped his lips. Yet, even he could not identify the source of the voice. If the initial chaos was incited by that voice's provocation, the subsequent turmoil was undoubtedly instigated by Duke Caesar, who ceased to conceal his intentions. With the aid of a secret incantation, Duke Caesar's faction achieved victory against the royal knights, albeit not without a cost. The lockdown was a concept utterly foreign to Tulip City. Only the elder residents could recall the scant instances of lockdowns throughout the past few decades, each one. Hurry! Only the first 10 to subdue the kudu will earn their own mounts. Be cautious of their horns. Do not engage with them. A sudden surge of strength coursed through the exhausted Nyotai. Restoring his vigor, you may relinquish your claims. They are yours for the taking, but you must await my sister's coming of age that time. I shall take her away from here to explore the world. After 2 full days of traveling southward, just as Nyotai's curiosity was on the verge of waning, the destination, the Grey Horn tribe, finally appeared on the horizon. Shall we wager? Will these 2 newcomers lose their virginity? I wager 10 copper coins that this honest fellow Nyotai will not succeed, even if... Nyotai rubbed his ears and looked towards his companion, whose sickly flush informed him that he had indeed heard correctly. Everything he saw and heard was undeniably real. Are you also from the Kingdom of Flowers? What business is it of yours? If you have money, bid. If not, keep silent. Am I not allowed to bid? Nyotai stood agape at the unfolding scene before him, racking his brain in vain to comprehend the origins of those calling out bids, their hands laden with gold coins. Smack! A gold brick the size of a blue brick appeared in Meng Qing's hands, crashing onto the wooden table with a resounding thud. No, it is elsewhere. Meng Qing nodded, then shook his head. Meeting the Tulip Queen was not a particularly pleasant prospect for him. Why you, hello, the bashful Nyotai, having ventured out of the tribe for the first time, stammered a greeting at Meng Qing, feeling somewhat overwhelmed. The following afternoon, members of the Kudu tribe gathered in the afternoon sun. Unlike before, 2 additional figures joined the ranks. Meng Qing and Lania. Meng Qing selected a location. Dozens of robust laborers wielding hoes and shovels began to toil upon the land above the skeletal remains. Gurgle! Upon witnessing that drop of demonic blood, Nyotai's vision narrowed, consumed solely by the allure of that single droplet of blood. Before embarking on his new endeavor, Meng Qing felt it imperative to conduct some experiments, akin to the medical practitioners of his former time and space, who would analyze patients before administering treatment. Except for a few, the members of the Kudu tribe remained oblivious to the considerable sum Meng Qing had expended for the colossal skeleton. However, it was easy to imagine it was no trifling amount. Before dawn, Meng Qing awoke from slumber. Beside him lay Lanya's delicate form. She had been overwhelmed by his demands the previous night and had yet to stir, gently, having lost a significant portion of his strength. Meng Qing felt no fear, for Nyotai, after unleashing this ability, was approaching him, though his body seemed to deflate. Currently, the demonic skeleton, replenished by Meng Qing's moonlight power, had transformed into a fresh skeleton, devoid of flesh and blood, even making Nyotai feel that the bones still. As dawn broke the next day, Meng Qing commenced a crucial experiment, with Nyotai acting as both witness and guard, standing resolutely by Meng Qing's side. This experiment demanded his undivided focus. Thunder originates from nature. It is not a skill that Meng Qing could surreptitiously acquire, as he was utterly incapable of unleashing such formidable energy. Yet, once the demonic body was formed, such a flawless demonic body does possess a flaw. It cannot move autonomously, as it lacks self-awareness. Indeed, this demonic, as Meng Qing departed the Kudu tribe, winter had yet to fully recede. The prairie winter, while not frigidly icy, was still bitterly cold, especially during the night. In his past life, Meng Qing had encountered numerous seas, some inland, others vast oceans, or even the ice-locked waters of polar regions, yet none could rival the spectacle before him. My son, I hear you sought out the owner of that iron vessel. Just as Duanmu returned to the palace, he had yet to dismiss his guards when a throng of uninvited guests. Is this the much-discussed iron ship? Truly remarkable. From a distance, he spotted the vessel Hope docked at the canal. The onlookers at the dock were nearly driven to madness. The queen, who had always commanded unwavering respect, now found herself embraced by Meng Qing as though she were an ordinary woman. Lanya's tone dripped with a hint of jealousy, despite having surrendered herself entirely to Meng Qing. Yet, in this moment, she struggled to feel truly at ease. Her son, The news of the Hope's departure reached the kingdom, landing in the ears of Duanmu and the Rose Queen, each reacting differently, yet both sensing a profound. Without sails or oars, this vessel undoubtedly concealed secrets unknown to others. Among those boarding, at least 3 harbored ulterior motives. How does it feel? Is this demonic body not utterly perfect? A voice roused the 3 individuals from their stupor, compelling them to lift their vigilant gazes. They had yet to behold the land, but Mengqing had already encountered the wise race dwelling in the boundless sea. They were not the lowly, intellectually deficient creatures known as fishmen, but rather something more profound. Were Mengqing and his companions thieves? Perhaps, or perhaps not. They had distanced themselves from their homeland and loved ones, drifting upon a vessel across the vast, endless ocean in search of. Upon disembarking onto an islet of mere 50 meters in diameter, they found themselves in the long-established habitat of a sea tribe that had yet to name themselves. They regarded the rocky island as the island and its surrounding waters that Mengqing now beheld resembled a city. The city, known as the City of Storms, as the name implies, the City of Storms venerates the winds. Saleh did not immediately respond to Mengqing's greeting. Instead, she emerged from the crowd, gliding along the constructed waterways. This scene left many beside Mengqing in quiet awe. Was this not akin to a humanoid weather forecast combined with a radar detector? After hearing the sea tribe's description, Mengqing could not help but ponder the environment within the territory of the sea folk. Upon recognizing Mengqing, a broader smile graced the face of the mermaid. To her, he represented the very goal of their expedition, an individual distinct from the sea tribe. Human, you and that. With the guidance of the mermaid, the voyage aboard the Hope, though lengthy, became far less tedious for the crew. For they had glimpsed hope, and hope alone is. The mermaid departed. She did not belong to the land. The ocean was her true homeland, and she would persist in her quest to find her kin. She remained until her figure completely vanished beneath the waves. After observing for a while, it became evident that the herd had indeed departed. The women and children returned to the cave to calm their frayed nerves, while the ordinary men, lacking combat prowess, were directed to undertake various tasks. They are alive. As Mengqing and his group drew near, the primitive-looking pioneers stood frozen in place, dropping all their possessions. Among the pioneers, a seasoned knight recounted tales of hardship, a narrative filled with sorrow that could be imagined by anyone aware that such a high-ranking knight, who was celebrated in the human realm, bore a heavy heart. After resting for a night in the cave, Mengqing and his companions resolutely bid farewell to the now indifferent pioneers and resumed their exploration of this land. That afternoon, Edith took her beloved steed and once again ventured outside the united camp. Dreamily perched atop the tall tree on the northern side, gazing into the distance. Shortly after Mengqing's return, a dubious rumor emerged from the Tide Kingdom, claiming that a new continent had been discovered upon the endless sea. Synopsis: The tale of the Flower Queen, captured by goblins, became a bestseller in the human realms, igniting fury among countless knights while simultaneously inciting a rush among nobles to purchase it. The Elven Queen was enraged by the story of the Elven Princess and the Seven Goblins, with the princess even going so far as to leave her home for a mere glimpse of him. Once the Ring of Power was unveiled, heroes across the land became entranced by its allure, and the Dark Lord in the Abyss proved to be its most devoted reader. However, when the Ring of Power ceased to be produced, the Dark Lord brazenly led countless dark beings forth from the Abyss, their might demanding its continuation. The heavens did not birth me a goblin. The otherworld stretches on like an eternal night.